for my computer, but no, I'm not at all. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and get started with our City Council meeting this evening. This is a special session of the City Council meeting. We've been are excited, maybe, we think we're excited, I'm just kidding, to have representatives here from the Utah Department of Transportation for a special presentation on the US 89 highway project. So we'll call that our opening. We'll have our official opening when our meeting commences at 7 p.m. We'll turn the time to representatives from UDOT.
Thank you. My name is Mike Romero. I'm the project manager with the DOT, and what we really wanted to do this evening was come out to the City Council and let them know where we're at in the project, the progress we've made to date, and the steps as we kind of move forward through the project. So the study area for the project extends from Shepherd Lane in Farmington up through I-84 in South Weber. On February 16th, 2017, we had a scoping meeting up in East Layton, and the purpose of that meeting was basically to identify what the boundaries of our environmental study were and to take comments from the public about what their concerns along the corridor were. Out of that meeting, we had about 285 people attend, and we received over 460 comments. The biggest areas of concern were increased noise, access along the corridor, safety, pedestrian bicycle access, as well as increased truck traffic. The purpose of the project is really to improve regional and local mobility, address current and future travel demands along the corridor, provide an enhanced system between 84 and I-15, as well as improve safety along the corridor. Really the driver for this project is the increasing population along the Wasatch Front. In northern Davis and Weber counties, we only have one major north-south corridor, and that's I-15. We do have 89 as well, and if we can improve functionality on 89, it really helps us improve the overall transportation system along the corridor and in the northern part of the country or state. So really the need is a lack of a well-functioning connection between I-15 and I-84. So what this graph shows is this shows the current level of operation along the system. As you can see, the lines in red, that's the pointer. The lines in red to the left here show a level of service E along the corridor, which is approaching that failing condition.
Are each of those little bubbles cross streets? Or?
They are cross streets. So we have SR 193, we have Antelope Drive, Cherry Lane. Those are the intersections along the corridor, the lighted intersections along the corridor.
Only lighted ones?
Yes.
What are the figures there? Can you read them to us? Like, we can't read them from here.
It's just basically gives you travel delays, times, that type of stuff. Current and future traffic analysis. Currently, 89 is operating at failing conditions. And in 2040, if there are no improvements made to the corridor, it's only going to continue to get worse. Safety is also a high concern along the corridor. Anytime you have a stop condition, especially in a high-speed facility, you tend to have increased accidents. And if you look here, we have a heat map that shows hotspots along the corridor where we have traffic accidents. Typically, these are front-to-rear collisions, people slowing down, people behind them not paying attention and rear-ending the vehicles in front of them, or people making a poor decision at a signalized intersection and making a turn in front of oncoming traffic and not having enough time to clear that intersection. So we are looking at, as part of this state environmental study, we're looking at three alternatives. The first alternative is a no-build alternative. We are looking at a freeway concept similar to what was identified in the original environmental impact statement that was done back in 1996. And we're also evaluating a one-way frontage road system as an alternative to the freeway concept. And both the freeway concept and the one-way frontage road system are controlled access facilities. And so really what's next? We're working through the alternatives development. We've got our survey done. We've got our utilities mapped out. We've been coordinating with the Weaver Basin Water District. We've been coordinating with communities along the corridor. And we plan on presenting our findings from the work that we're currently doing at a open house that will be held June 20th at Layton High School from 4:30 to 7 to present the different alternatives to the public and receive comment or feedback from the public related to these alternatives.
Can you maybe just, with this being the environmental study, maybe just give us a brief summary of the difference between an environmental impact study, like a full-blown EIS, like West Davis Corridor, and what you're doing here, and maybe just so we have a clear understanding of the process and the opportunities to give feedback.
Okay. So the concepts behind the two studies are very, very similar. The biggest difference being is an EIS is a NEPA document based on federal requirements. Because the West Davis Corridor is probably going to be paid for with federal funds, the state environmental study, or the EIS needs to be done in accordance with those federal requirements. Our project is funded with state funds, and so we are held to state standards, which the standards between an EIS and a state environmental study are very, very similar. There are certain things that we're required to do under the NEPA process that we're not required to do under a state study, but we have to look at the same types of things: environmental resources along the corridor, historic properties, wetlands, threatened and endangered species. So all of the things that we have to evaluate under an EIS are looked at under a state study. It's just looked at just a little bit differently. So there's a lot of those steps along the way. So we plan on having the open house in June to receive comment, and once we receive the comments from that open house, we plan on having a preferred alternative identified and have a public hearing held in August. And okay, and so, Larry just brought up the slide for the screening process. And kind of what we do with the screening process is, and what we're doing right now, is we're looking at a wide range of alternatives, and we're just throwing it out there and see what sticks. And we look at it from an engineering feasibility standpoint. We're trying to figure out, is it feasible, is it practical, what are the impacts associated with that? Then we take it and we evaluate it from our purpose and need standpoint. The controlling language of the document, does it meet the purpose and need, the requirements that were set forth? And then after we take it through the purpose and need, we look at environmental screenings as well. What are the impacts to the environmental resources along the corridor? What are the impacts to homes along the corridor? We evaluate it from that. And that's really how we get to the alternatives that we're going into in depth. And that's kind of where we're getting to now, is that in-depth analysis for some of these alternatives or concepts. And through that process and through the public open house we're having in June, we'll identify a preferred alternative. The schedule as we have it, as it sits right now, we have had the concept scoping meeting. We defined our purpose and need for the project. We've gone through the identification and initial development of alternatives, and we're working towards that concept open house. We're working through the details right now to develop these, to figure out what we think those impacts with the different alternatives are actually going to be. So when we present this information in June, we can really try to portray a clear and accurate picture of what we think will happen. And then through that, after that meeting, we're going to look at the environmental resource analysis. We're going to prepare our draft environmental study for between July and August. And there's our public hearing being held in August. And then after that public hearing, we'll prepare the final state environmental study. And we're hoping to have a decision document signed in November of this year. So we do want to stay involved. We'll be reaching out to the cities along the corridor. We'd like to set up monthly meetings with with Andy and with the city managers, the mayor, as we work through these processes, kind of talk through issues that we see as we develop along the corridor, and work to a solution that hopefully can, is a best fit solution for the communities along there. And with that, I would like to thank you for our time. Do you have any questions for us?
I I have maybe just a couple. We've had the opportunity to meet at least once.
Yes.
And talk about some concepts that I know you'll be bringing to the open house. There was, someone I'm not sure where it originated, but had pieced together some concepts that included and has caused a lot of alarm for folks that live in the upper Crestwood area as they intersect with Highway 89. As you're aware, the city owns a 10-acre and an 11-acre parcel,
Yes,
one
sir.
that runs right next to Crestwood, below 89, and another one just a little bit further south. But that concept showed the road to a very nice wide not nice is not the right word, a very wide merge cutting right across the middle of that park,
Yes.
that property, which I think I indicated in our meeting would be very problematic for the city for many reasons, that it has been designated, or at least anticipated, that would be a couple of things, but more recently we've been made aware of a commitment from the city, that the commitment that the city made some time ago to a family, that it would be eventually become a
Yes,
park.
and I actually had these two gentlemen here come and meet with me about a month ago, I think it was. And so we sat down and we talked to them, and we were evaluating some concepts that really eliminates the impacts to those properties, or minimizes the impacts to those properties.
Okay. And I think we'd shared that as one of our concerns in our
Yes.
meeting as well. And so today, as far as what it's you're primarily presenting the outline to us, but not necessarily any options for us
No,
to.
and we're really working through those. We have, this road layout is a three-dimensional problem, and we have two-dimensional lines on paper, and we're going through and we're putting that third dimension in there. We're putting the vertical profiles in, and we're looking at the impacts associated from that. And so at this point in time, we're really not prepared to discuss options, and that's why we have that meeting pushed back to June. It takes us quite a bit of time and a large effort from our designers to get to that level of detail.
That was good. And those who have asked, and including one of the gentlemen that you've met with, we had indicated that would be really problematic for us. And so I know it's a little bit cart before the horse, because
Yes.
that was circulating, but I just wanted to.
Yeah, and that concept actually came from the 1996 environmental study that was done. The purpose behind that concept was, at that point in time, they're planning on taking Crestwood Road up and over Highway 89, and to maintain access to all the houses to the north of Crestwood, they had to diverge and go through that property. There may be some other options that eliminate the need to go through that property.
So that image was 20 years old then? That
Yes,
was circulating?
that was from 1996 as part of the original state environmental, or the EIS that was done.
That's helpful. Thank you. So questions then, if we don't, doesn't sound like we have anything to observe or at least give feedback on, but the process itself, we'll start first. Any questions from the council? And since we've got some time, if any members of the public have questions about the process they'd like to ask, we'll provide that opportunity as well. Council?
I have a question, Mayor. If it's
Technically,
okay.
your staff.
I know, that's what I'm asking.
All right, hearing none from council.
I didn't know I wasn't included in the public or the council, so I was going to interject
kidding.
myself.
I just couldn't.
I just wanted to ask Mike, as we get concerns and questions as a city, would you prefer us to, obviously, we'd like to advertise this June 20th meeting very heavily. I think you guys did a wonderful job of advertising the Nichols Road meeting. I assume you'll do a similar
Yes, and so
rollout.
as part of this study, we do have a public involvement team. We have Marty AC here, Amelia Deslis here as well, and they will be responsible for reaching out to the cities, making sure the cities are aware of it, doing coordination if we want to put something in your utility bill or something like that to make people aware of it. We have hired some very good people to help us get the word out. We do want to have public participation. We want the feedback. We want the comments.
Great.
And the contact information on the slide there is the best way for
Yes.
people to reach us.
Okay.
And that is, I should have pointed that out as well. Our website is up there. That can be accessed at any time. We do have a project hotline as well as a project email address, and we can be contacted through that at any time along the process or through that process.
That's good. And the presentation that you gave tonight, we've also made available on our website. I believe we uploaded it as
Okay.
part of the city council packet. And you can zoom in on those and read them a little better
Yes.
You can get those facts and figures.
on a screen.
So-
All right.
So just looking at your timeline and your schedule, so by the end of the year, you're hoping to have all of the feedback in place, all of
Yes.
the design and everything done?
Not all of
or-
the design, the environmental process. So
Just
for
the
for us to go out and do this, we need to clear a footprint for what we think the most likely build alternative is going to be. This project is going to be delivered under a design-build procurement method. And so we will clear a footprint, we will identify the impacts associated with that footprint, and then we will come up with a set of rules and regulations for the design-build contractor to follow. And typically, those will be a set typical section for Highway 89 and any cross street that we're working on, a set typical section for side streets, frontage roads, and a baseline concept. And then the details of that could change. So it will not be set in stone, but the footprint will be cleared to allow for some deviations.
So if things are planned out and then you see a need for changes, will you go back to the public once again with those changes? Is that how that's going to work, or
It
what?
depends on what the change ends up being. If it's a design refinement or a shift in details, then no, we would not go back out to the public. If there is a major impact associated with that change, we would have to go back out and amend our document. And it depends on what that change ends up being.
Okay, any other questions from the
And
council?
so it sounds like the timing, design of the formal footprint
Yes.
would begin in 2018. I believe your
So,
presentation indicated
What
that.
we're looking at is, it's a design build delivery method. So after we complete our environmental statement and we have a signed decision document, we'll have a program manager on board that will help us develop a baseline design. And this baseline design is a tool to help the contractors put together their bids. The final design will actually happen when the contract has been awarded to the design build team. And the final design will end up starting probably April of 2019, and we anticipate that design being wrapped up around fall of 2019, early winter of 2020. And construction will actually start in the summer of 2019 as well, based on the schedule.
So even as design is occurring, there will be construction that will, or
Yes.
pre-construction,
And
basically?
typically what it may be is it may be out there moving utilities, it may be doing some rough grading, it may be some clearing and grubbing, cutting down trees, and doing some other things like that.
Okay, so we're looking at likely construction 2020, completion 2021?
Probably looking construction starting spring 2019, hitting really, really heavy in summer of 2019 and continuing through, best estimate right now is summer, fall of 2021. And as we get into that baseline design and we get that developed, we will be able to go in and put a better schedule together.
And is it because this particular project is being funded through state funds as opposed to federal funds? That it's,
Yes.
we don't have to have the same kind of involvement as the West Davis corridor?
Yes, and that is a NEPA process, and this is a state process, and there are some distinct differences between the two.
Okay.
So in one of the slides, you show the safety concerns because of the overcrowding. What would normal be for, like, if the road, if you were all done with construction, and also would it make an impact on, I can definitely see the car-to-car collisions going down if the flow of traffic is improved. How would the wild animal impact be addressed?
As part of that, we've been coordinating with the Division of Wildlife Services as well as part of this project, and we're looking at some different alternatives to help mitigate the animals from crossing the road. That may be through a series of deer fence or sound walls or some other physical barriers to keep them off the roadway. That'd probably be the biggest benefit itself, is just minimizing restricting access, is being able to install deer fence or barriers or some sort of fencing system to keep them off the road.
Yeah, from the data, is it fairly safe to say or well-grounded to say that compared to a freeway system with the same amount of traffic, that the freeway, of course, because of all the intersections and roads and traffic lights and variation of speed, that there would be significantly less accidents once the improvements are complete?
Based on what we're looking at, we're anticipating significantly fewer accidents because we don't have those stop-and-go conditions. I mean, we do have accidents on our interstates on a daily basis. We don't have the stop-and-go accidents, the number of accidents that we see typically on this type of facility. Because of the high speeds, you know, as you look at this road, you stop at Nichols Road in a non-congested period, you can be doing 65, 70 miles an hour when you get to Second North. And if somebody's not paying attention and the car stops in front of them, they're looking at their phone, they're eating a hamburger or something like that, there is that potential. And so that stop and go along the corridor really does cause a safety concern.
Thank you. Since this is a public meeting, we would we've now provided the opportunity for anyone in the public that would like to ask questions. But since it is a public meeting, we would ask you just to come to the microphone, state your name for the record, and ask any questions that you might have. Mr. Gerard.
Dwayne Gerard, neighbor up there, Mike. Do you have a copy of the slide that's being circulated that the mayor talked about that's causing a lot of neighborhood concern? Do you have a copy of that you could put on the screen?
I don't have a copy of it, but we have a concept that's similar to that. It's not the original.
The one that was done in '96?
Yes.
Did we look at that in there?
That's not it.
That's 200 north, maybe.
That's 200 north.
We're talking about the Crestwood Road area.
Do we want them to have access to this on screen, or no? It is. Yeah, it's part of that. He's asking about the slide.
And we have that
shows that
environmental impact statement available
the
on the website as well.
cutoff in that land.
There you go.
There it is. Yeah, that's it. There's that beauty. So this is the one that was developed in '96, is that
Yes,
correct?
that was done in 1996.
And this is Crestwood Road here
Yep.
with a cul-de-sac or something there? And then this is access road that'll cross over to the north?
Yes.
And this one will wind around through that beautiful country and go south?
That's what was identified back in 1996, yes.
That's the one we're concerned about right there, because it virtually takes out that 10.5 acre that we anticipate to be a park.
And you're aware of that concern. Like I mentioned, we're looking at alternatives to eliminate that.
And do you have the proposal that you showed us the other day in your office, that was another original proposal in '96 that doesn't show it impacting that 10-acre piece? So,
One of the concepts, and this is a two-dimensional line up on a piece of paper. This is another concept that does not show that impact.
right.
There are some differences with this concept compared to the other concept.
What are they?
With this concept, 89 has to go up and over Crestwood Road. So there's some switch offs between the two different concepts. One of them impacts the property, which raises the grade of 89, so that's balance that we're looking through. And as we get further into the details and figure out how high we have to go and all, that's really kind of where we're working through right now.
Are there any other proposals that have ever been put on the table since '96 besides these two?
Not that I'm aware of.
We have variations of those two.
But similar to them?
Yeah.
It's between those two alternatives that we're evaluating, 89 over, Crestwood over, where can we put Crestwood over? So we're in the process of evaluating.
And if you could all use your mics too, just because since we're broadcasting and recording.
Apologize.
Yeah, we're in the process of developing numerous alternatives through here. We realize the importance of that property. But as Mike said, the impacts of 89 over versus 89 under, Crestwood over, that's currently what we're doing and in the process of that screening process now.
But there's quite a rise in Crestwood Road there, so going under seems to make a lot of sense to me.
There's some, we have issues of whether to go over or whether to go under. Oh, sorry. I apologize. There are some issues with going over versus going under, and they're kind of reversed. So if we have to go take Crestwood up and over, we have to build a big hill to get up and over the freeway. If we take Crestwood under 89, we either have to dig a big hole to go under the freeway, so we have a lot of the same limitations that we have by going over 89. And that may change how Crestwood ties in. Now, if we take 89 up and over, we may be able to keep Crestwood Road at its existing grade, but that does change the profile of the roadway, of the highway, yes.
And so do you anticipate, because this, I think, from Kaysville's perspective, I mean, this is the small portion that is actually in Kaysville. This is probably where we have the most interest.
Yes.
At your June 20th meeting, are you going to have a few options and then ask for feedback, or are you presenting a preferred?
Well, at that meeting, we have the two main concepts. We're going to be presenting different alternatives associated with that concept and kind of the screening process that we went through as to why we're showing what we are showing, but it will be open to comment. And so that will be kind of the feedback that we have, is it will be open to comment. So you may see a screen like we just saw that shows it going through that property, and either it goes above 89 or it goes below 89, but because of those impacts, those tie-ins to the neighborhoods north of Crestwood, we would have to probably do something like that from an engineering standpoint, so you could still get access into those properties. And then you may see an alternative that has 89 going up and over that doesn't impact those, and we may identify that as a concept that we prefer because it does not impact the properties there, right there at that Kaysville City owns. And so, but we would show what we looked at and we'd give the rationale as to why we're showing you what we're showing.
Okay. And just, I know that on a federal process, especially when you look at anticipated park properties, it creates some more issues, and it's not even so much just hey, we don't want to give up our land, as much as it is, hey, the community expectation was set long ago, and it would be impossible from our vantage point to change course on that.
No, and we understand that.
I think we'll tell you maybe 30, 40 more times between now and June 20th. But.
That's perfectly fine.
All right. Any other community questions? Yes, please. If you'll state your name for the record, too.
Craig Edgman. So you're saying one of the proposals will be like Crestwood going under 89?
It's an option or alternative that we will evaluate through this process, and we will present that, what the impact with doing that will be.
Okay. And then, so will one proposal still be the going through the city property there? Or is that going to come off the table, or do you think it'll?
I think it's one that we will identify, because if we take 89 up and over and we don't show that, people are going to ask us, well, why didn't you take Crestwood Road over?
Okay.
And so we will provide that information. So at a minimum, people can see the decision-making process that we looked at.
And if Crestwood went under, I mean, are you guys going to look at like how creative you can be with that? Like, I mean, because it does peak out at the top of Crestwood, and so if you, I don't know, if there was some point when you could start going under and maybe you even veer Crestwood off 10 or 20 feet, away from where it is now, just to the very top. I don't know where UDOT owns that property, or the state does, at the top, those two houses. So instead of that cul-de-sac, maybe it curves, I don't know, I'm just, like I don't know, somewhere, but if you curve like here, like maybe even, I don't know, I'm just wondering if just a little bit of change there gives you room to dig more and not have as much elevation on 89.
What we try to do is balance the different, we try to balance the difference between the two. So maybe we end up lowering Crestwood 5 or 10 feet and minimizing how much you have to raise 89. There's a balancing act, and that's kind of what we're looking at right now, is that balancing act between raising 89, lowering Crestwood, taking one all the way down, or the other all the way up. And that's the information that will be presented there.
Just a separate question, I'm sure you guys have done like traffic projections of how much more traffic is going to come through. Now it's going to be a more probably inviting road for like diesels and other trucks, and so there is going to be the natural increase in traffic, but also maybe this will funnel even more traffic. As far as like noise, like sound walls you mentioned, is that Are sound walls a city expense, or is that like a UDOT, or does that help, or how?
It's a UDOT expense.
It is. I'm going to change the mayor's answer just a little bit. So UDOT's noise policy has some very stringent requirements as to when a noise wall is warranted. If all the criteria is met for that, that includes the level of decibels, the number of impacted residents, feasibility from an engineering standpoint, as well as a cost impact. All of those are figured together, and if it is warranted, there is still the public balloting process that it could meet all the criteria, but if the residents didn't want it, we would not install a sound wall. And so if it meets all that criteria, it still comes down to the residents having a choice as to whether a sound wall is installed or not. If it does not meet those criteria, we cannot by law, by UDOT policy, install that sound wall. And it's a very stringent policy. Now, if the city chose to have a sound wall installed, it would be at their expense. And so it's under those two separate scenarios that we really have to look at. If it's warranted, it's a UDOT cost. If it doesn't meet that requirement, and it was something the city really wanted us to do and they're willing to pay for it, we would install it.
Another question there.
Lamont Jacobs. I live at 892 Ice Pond Road, and I want to approach this a little different than what you're going at, but I want you to understand how important this piece of property. I'd like you to go back to the picture before showing Crestwood Road and Highway 89. About the turn of the century, my grandfather, Joseph Openshaw, and George Openshaw and Dummers came up and homesteaded 240 acres. And it included going from Ward's Road to Crestwood Road, and then it went from there from the golf course, from where Brother Councilman Page is, up to Highway 89 and across Highway 89 for 20 acres that belonged to our grandparents. They came up and homesteaded that area and farmed. They had tomatoes and peaches and apricots. They planted 18 acres of cherries right in that quadrant there of Crestwood Road and Highway 89. And they had water. They got the water that they used from springs that came down from the mountains, and we still have some rights in there. Well, a lot of time went on about the time of the 1930s and so forth in through there in the Depression. They had to divide the land, and some of them went to California, and the 240 acres came down to about 50 acres. And of my grandfather, there were 3 children. One of them was Leon Openshaw, now Jacobs, and the other one was Gladys McFarland, Gladys Openshaw, and then the third was Howard. Gladys Openshaw got kind of a 10 acres that went just south of Lether's home and west there of 10 acres. My mother got our home where we are at 892 Crestwood Road, and we have about 7.5 acres there. Howard Openshaw got the little strip by the frontage road there of the 4 homes that are there, and along with the 20 acres that are now Talbot's property. If you were to go into the city council hitter meeting over here that showed the big board of early people coming to Kaysville, Joseph Openshaw's right up there in the right-hand corner. There's a lot of things around him because they homesteaded that 240 acres. Well, Gladys McFarland sold to Kaysville City the 10 acres, and with the understanding that Kaysville City, when a park was built, that they would name that park after the Openshaws. We have a statement from Mayor Roundy verifying that situation and agreement with the city. The McFarlands donated at that time $250,000 to Kaysville City with the understanding if there was a park built that they would reserve that park and name it under the name of Openshaw. And so I guess I'm just trying to say that our roots go real deep in there. This property to us is very sacred and very special. I grew up in Kaysville. We've been here 42 years, but my grandparents have been here a long time, and every summer we would come up and work with our grandparents and help with the cherries and so forth of that kind. So we love this land. And apart from all of the other problems, I hope that Kaysville City will give real consideration to this idea of the park, reserving the name of Openshaw, and that UDOT will be aware of our love and concern of that wonderful piece of property. I don't think that there's another piece of property like that in Kaysville that's left. And I think it would be a lot better being a park. And if UDOT can work around that, I think it would be a great blessing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
My name's Greg Ferguson. I'm a resident at the top of Crestwood Road. I've been here for 34 years or something. I wonder if we could go back to one of the early slides when you had the three options that we had for this corridor. There. We've heard a lot of talk here this afternoon, but no one has mentioned anything about option number one, which is no action. It's unfortunate, I think, that when Interstate 84 and Interstate 15 were built back in the 70s, that the connection between those two in Riverdale was never built. That you can get from southbound I-15 to eastbound 84 or westbound 84 to northbound 15, but you can't go from westbound 84 to southbound I-15, which is where most of the traffic would go, nor can you go northbound I-15 and get on to eastbound 84. And for some reason, Highway 89 got that dubious distinction of that connection. There is no reason why it has to be that connection. There is still property, I have a photograph of it right here, in the Riverdale area that is vacant, that on one piece of paper, you can see Highway 80, Interstate 84 and Interstate 15. They're just one field apart. Vacant land where that connection could be built. And Highway 89 would no longer have to be designated the connection between 84 and I-15. It would cost far less money. It would keep the interstate truck traffic on an interstate freeway on 84 and connect them right to another interstate, I-15, which is what 89 is doing at this point, but it doesn't need to be that way. This is land that doesn't need to be ripped up. It doesn't need to be taken away from people. Nobody's talked about the no-build option. Mr. Romero, you might remember me from the meeting that we had at the elementary school when I brought all this information about not using 89 as that connection. Do you remember what you told me? I will quote you just because you may not remember. After I discussed all this with you, you told me it's not gonna happen. Those were your exact words. I don't think UDOT is giving any consideration to the no-build option. I think they're just, did you hear anything discussed about that tonight from these gentlemen? Not one word. They have just passed that underneath the rug. They're not going to talk about it. It's a build proposition for them, but it doesn't need to be. If we can take the trucks off of 89, keep them on the interstate freeway system, it will make that road infinitely safer than it already is. We can look at information which I have here, the 2015 Utah crash synopsis. Unfortunately, it doesn't single out that section of Highway 89, but it does look at all roads in Utah. Fatal crashes in the period of time from 2012 and 2014, the 3-year period, compared to 2015, fatal truck crashes involving heavy trucks increased 103% in the state of Utah. In that same period of time, the 3 years prior to 2015, compared to 2015, speed crashes increased 8.3% and were the leading cause of fatalities in the state of Utah at 37.4%. And if you look at the Utah crash summary, and this is put together by the Department of Public Safety, they say right in here, a heavy truck crash in Utah occurred every 2 hours. A speed-related crash occurred every 50 minutes, and speed is the leading contributing factor in deaths. So 2 things that we could do. We can take interstate truck traffic off of 89 by building the connections that were never built that would allow those trucks to get from westbound 84 to southbound 15 or northbound 15 to eastbound 84 without having to get off the freeway using vacant land that exists, and we could get the speed under control. We don't have to live in the 20th century. We are in the 21st century, and there are better ways to regulate speed on roads than having troopers out there pulling people over in busy corridors, which just increases the amount of danger both for the troopers and for the drivers. There are better ways to do that, and we ought to think about that before we start ripping up land. We know what the facts are, why crashes occur and why fatalities occur. There are ways to address those 2 things, speed and trucks, without having to build Highway 89. Why didn't we hear anything about that? Because they've already committed to building. They have the money already allocated, and it's a build thing. I think we need to step back. I think we need to look at a no-build option. It's a very reasonable thing. You might also note that the Wasatch Front Regional Council has looked at this corridor and designates it as primarily residential. This 8.9 miles, primarily residential. Is that where you want to have interstate trucks carrying volatile things, gasoline, oil, butane, liquefied petroleum gas, right along that corridor where all those houses are? Mr. Americ, do you know on the top of your mind of any accidents involving those trucks along Highway 89 in the last little while? Well, let me just tell you about one. And it's interesting because that accident happened 12 years to the day that you held this meeting at East Elementary School, when a truck carrying 13,000 gallons of butane failed to stop at 2nd North, rolled over, and the tanks rolled into the ditch. Fortunately, they did not explode on impact, and it gave them time to evacuate thousands of people. But ultimately that night, that butane truck exploded in a residential area. But fortunately, those people had a chance to be evacuated. There was another fire on a truck northbound on 89, even more recent than that. But the point is, these are dangerous things that are traveling through this residential corridor that don't need to be there. The interstate system, Interstate 84 down through Riverdale, is very sparsely populated. It's a freeway system. It's meant and posted at 70 miles an hour. Highway 89 is 55 miles an hour, has 12 lights, and trucks stop and go, stop and go. There are major obstructions to people driving cars, trying to get around them, not behind them. Acceleration, deceleration, vision around those trucks is a big issue. And as is evident from the information I pointed out earlier, truck crashes have doubled in the last couple of years. I would like to just say, I would like to get a commitment, actually, from UDOT that that option is a realistic one that you're looking at.
We are looking at the no-build option. Oh, sorry. We are looking at a no-build option. It will be identified and addressed in the state environmental study. And as I mentioned to you, in that meeting we had in February, I do not have the authority to prohibit traffic on 89, truck traffic. That takes a legislative act. That is above and beyond and outside of my control.
That is true. And the legislative act occurred for Legacy Highway. That occurred because of birds. We might consider people that live in this residential area as equivalent at least to birds.
And like I said, that is above and beyond my control. I have no authority to change, make that change.
But it just seemed to me that having not addressed it at all in your comments, that it's not getting much attention. And I would like it if it would get some real attention. Here is the picture.
Mr. Ferguson, I think the intent tonight, I think, was primarily for UDOT to come tell us about their timeline. We opened it for some opportunity because all of you came tonight and we wanted to give them some feedback. We'll also commit to press UDOT for more discussion on the no-build option as well.
Please. I'd be glad to share lots of information with you that makes perfect sense about a no-build option. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, sir.
My name is Greg Jones, and unfortunately, my house, the backyard is Highway 89. I had a couple of questions, maybe concerns. In the past 2 years, we've had 2 cars make it to my fence. They've been deflected by a berm and everything else there. And I understand all of the plans involve moving traffic closer to my home. And what kind of barriers, safety barriers, for the residents that remain, especially with the traffic moving closer to the home, are being considered?
Do you want to address that one, Larry?
Yeah, what we do is we have a design criteria, is what's called clear zone, that we have to have a certain area, but if we're encroaching into that clear zone, we put up a physical crash barrier that keeps cars from exiting that clear zone. But we have a criteria on a distance from the lane line to the right-of-way or a property or an obstacle that we will meet that criteria and put up a crash barrier if it's required.
Okay. And is there any information I can get on the UDOT side about how that's calculated, or is that just?
There's standard sheets, and there's a book about this thick that we'd be glad to go through, but we can take a note and be prepared.
Do you know whether either that or sound walls are being considered south of 89, north of Crestwood?
Sound walls will be considered through the entire corridor, and an analysis will be done, and as Mike said before, we'll go through the process of whether they qualify or not. But what I'd encourage you is go to the website, make the comment, we get those comments, and then we'll address that comment for you.
Okay.
And give us your address and where you're located, and we can look at that specifically.
Okay, thank you. Now, when was the preferred alternative going to be announced? Do we have a timeline exactly on that?
That would be August timeframe.
Okay, so we're not sure.
No specific.
Okay. And I would just like to also comment on the alternative addressed by Mr. Ferguson just prior to me. I think that makes a lot of sense because I see the trucks as being the big problem. You know, when trucks roll by my house, I feel them. And then they're going to move them closer with these plans. And I think if safety is really the concern, we should look at things like that that may actually dramatically improve safety with a lot less cost. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Randy Von Bosi. I'm jumping into this, so I just have questions. The first is, I know this is being funded by the state. I'm just wondering if this is already funds that are saved, if we're bonding for it, if it's part of a tax measure, or where that specifically is coming from. And then just a follow-up question, not related to that, but a different one is, will this decision ultimately be made just by UDOT? Will it get put out there for, I mean, I know you're getting citizen feedback, but who ultimately makes this decision?
The funding was approved in the 2015 legislative session. I'm not sure which House bill it was approved under. And over the next 5 years, we will receive funding for the project. It is not part of the bonding package that was just approved in the last legislative session. Typically what would happen is that bonding package would have sped up anything associated with the project. This project was not included in that. And then part of, ultimately the decision-making process will go through the DOT, taking feedback and addressing comments that we receive from the public input, the public hearings, and the public processes that we go through to develop the document. And that'll be signed off by, I'm not sure if it's our director or the deputy director of the department.
But it doesn't go back to Congress or anything?
No, this is all within in-house based on state policy and procedure that are currently in place.
Thank you. We have a few more minutes. Any other questions? Well, I think the key date, and we do have contact information that was included on that slide, and maybe if you could go back to that slide. I think the key date for an update will be that June 20th meeting. It does sound like, if you have feedback that you want to give, I heard these gentlemen say they'll make a couple of notes to come prepared to answer some of these questions that have been raised. You can send an email to us89@utah.gov. And I think just based on, we have some business cards.
Contact information on them as well.
Great. I think involvement, the fact that many of you, the fact that you're here tonight is key, as we've seen this even more complicated and confusing process on West Davis Corridor that has been going on for 7-8 years now, working through that process. Staying involved and sharing the feedback, I think is key. And we'll commit, as I mentioned to Mr. Ferguson, to have more dialogue and discussion about the no-build option as well. And would encourage all of you to participate as you see fit. So we will appreciate everyone's participation. Appreciate you being here. We will go into recess temporarily and reconvene our regular city council meeting at 7 p.m. Actually, I'd probably take a motion to close this special presentation or special city council meeting.
I'll make that motion that we close the meeting.
Yeah, I'll second.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Lee and a second by Councilmember Page. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Voting is unanimous. We will begin our city council meeting at 7 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
What's on the website? Yes, but can I bring, can you please change it? We can just. Okay.
Because not to be, we're not trying to be secretive, it's just,
No, it's, you don't want to cause a stir when it's
some
unnecessary.
people are gonna see some of those and just.
Okay. Thank you. You bet. So you go to do what you're thinking for. He's gonna say it all. He'll say, now's the time when you call the public, the recorder will do 3 minutes. He could have done that. He could have said, we'll give you 3 minutes. And if you would have said that, then yeah, but I was afraid he's delaying, I think, because I thought that presentation would take an hour, 12 minutes, so I think he's a little more loosey-goosey. You haven't, the glow.
So bright. But now the rest of the
It's nice when people notice on their own, too.
Yes,
So it's a significant difference when they notice it.
I'm usually fishing for compliments.
I thought I authorized all those lights. Fifth of June, right after.
Yeah, I think so.
When are we out? Friday, first
I
Friday.
can relate not as bad as the man.
Yeah, snipe.
Steve, are you functional?
I think so.
I am on like 4 hours of sleep, and I woke up at 5:30 Eastern time.
He's on the reserve tank.
And yeah,
Back there to testify in Congress on airlines.
Oh, is it?
I was testifying. I made no sense, and they said you fit in great.
You hear and.
The no sense, bad jokes. See, that's my no sleep. Terrible.
We're getting down to
Yeah,
the
usually I'm good
X's.
for at least a courtesy laugh.
Yeah.
But
That's early.
Do you want to lead us in the pledge?
sure. You're asking me.
Yeah. Are you good for the opening? Have some for an opening?
I'll take care of it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and get started with our city council meeting this evening. We appreciate all of you in attendance. To begin tonight's meeting, we'll have an opening that will be provided by Councilmember Adams, after which Councilmember Chris Snell will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Much obliged to have Mrs. Randy Von Bose offer our opening prayer. Invited her to do so. Thank you, Randy.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful unto thee for this city that we live in, for the country that we live in, and for the freedoms that we enjoy. We are grateful to live in a place where we can worship as we will. We pray this night that our leaders will be led and directed, and that they will be able to see the needs of the citizens and also the best way to move our city forward. We thank thee again, Father, for thy goodness and mercy in our lives, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 Will the audience please rise and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated.
Thank you very much for those who participated in our openings. To begin tonight's meeting, we'll have introductions. My name is Steve Hyatt, and I serve as the mayor of Kaysville City.
Jake Garn, City Council.
Dave Adams.
Susan Lee, City Council.
Chris Snell, City Council.
Larry Page, City Council.
Shane Scott, city manager.
Becky Argyle.
Andy Thompson, engineer.
Thank you. Appreciate Becky filling in for Maria this evening and fulfilling our recorder duties. We do have agendas available on the wall over here to the left. You're more than welcome to grab one and check off as we move through the list. And it makes the time go a little faster. We don't have, several years ago, we started doing a business spotlight in our city council meeting. When we invite members of our community, business members of our community, to come present to the city council, highlight their business to those in attendance, and as a result, we'll highlight their business on our city marquee and in an upcoming newsletter. And we are privileged to have Natalie Jean with Natalie Jean Photography, a business here in Kaysville who provides local expertise and affordable services. I didn't come up with that on my own, but I read it very good. And she's here to give us a presentation on her business. So I'll turn the time to Natalie.
Hey, I'm a photographer for Natalie Jean Photography. This is my equipment. This is what I use.
see me around with that a lot. Just an introduction to myself. Go back because people, but this is my family. I have 2 little girls, Ruby and Elena, and that's kind of where my photography really got started. I've always loved photography, but when she was born, I just wanted to preserve all the memories of her, and so it just kind of bloomed from there. People saw my pictures of her, and they asked, well, could you do my family pictures? And it just has kind of gone from there. I grew up in a small town in Idaho called Weston, and my mom was actually the mayor of Weston, so I'm familiar with city council. She's been on city council for as long as I've been alive. So I'm kind of excited to be here. It's fun to be a part of Kaysville. We've lived in Kaysville for 3 years. We've been renting and we haven't wanted to move, and we finally just, next Wednesday, we'll be purchasing our home here in Kaysville, and we're excited to stay and become official residents of Kaysville. And, I have some examples of my work, but I wanted to explain a little bit of what I do. For my photography, they say you're supposed to specialize in something, and I cannot specialize in one thing because I get bored if I just do weddings. They get a little stressful, so I throw families in there. And with the house that we're purchasing, pretty lucky that there's a spot that was a woodworking shop that we're going to turn into my studio. So I'm really excited to be able to keep my business growing and become more of a studio here in Kaysville to provide services like newborn photography and even family photography in there. There's a lot that goes into photography. I know a lot of people claim to be photographers, and they probably are, but some people aren't. You have to go through the steps. You have to be, business licensed and registered in the city and stuff like that. And I've gone through all those steps, and I am pay taxes and all that fun stuff. So it's exciting that we get to stay here in Kaysville. This is my website. There's a spot that tells about me. It has my blog with recent sessions, pricing, and portfolio, different photos that I have up there. It's kind of a bad representation of the pictures. But anyway, I love living in Kaysville because we have, it's a perfect spot. There's beautiful spots here in Kaysville, but then it's like the perfect spot because you're like 30 minutes away from Salt Lake City. You're 30 minutes away from Snow Basin, and it's beautiful photography there. I love over in Fruit Heights behind Nichols Park is one of my favorite locations. That's where my family picture was taken. I feel like that's still Kaysville to me. It's close enough, right? So I like to keep it here in Kaysville as much as I can, but I love that it's a perfect location to get to so many other beautiful locations here. As my appreciation to the City Council and for members and for all that you do, I have my business cards with 25% off of a family session, or if you have a senior that's graduating or know of a senior or a missionary or anything like that, go ahead and put it towards that, whatever you'd like to do. But I really appreciate you guys and all you do to keep this city so wonderful, and I'm excited to grow my business here in Kaysville and become an official resident of Kaysville. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalie.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we will post your information, but just so folks know, it's Natalie Jean. What's your website? It's cut off there, so I can't quite see. natjeanphoto.com, and you can see some great examples of Natalie's work. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here, and thank you for sharing your business with us. And thanks for being in Kaysville, and congratulations on your home as well. The next item on our agenda is call to the public. This is the time in our city council meeting when we open the microphone to any of you in attendance that would like to address the city council. We do not have any public hearings scheduled as part of tonight's city council meeting. So if you'd like to address the city council regarding one of tonight's agenda items, this would be your opportunity to do so. We do ask out of respect the time that you keep your comments limited to 3 minutes. Our city recorder does keep track of time up here up front, so when you hear the not so subtle beeping, that's an indication that your time has expired, and we would ask you to wrap up your comments. So with that introduction, we will open call to the public.
Good evening. My name is Clarence Aldridge. I reside at 1375 Appaloosa Avenue here in Kaysville. I am concerned about the proposal agenda item number 4. the rezoning of the 1.66 acres of the rezoning of the Burton Lane property across from the storage facility. I live about 1 block from there, fairly near to that. Interestingly enough, I'm a personal friend of Jim Puffer, who is, I'm sure, the one who's petitioning for that. My concerns are that there has not been very good notice. I do realize there's been a sign on the property. However, I'm unaware of any letters or any other notice that's been given to our neighborhood about this. Second, I'm worried that this property has been purchased and is already being used for commercial purposes, even though it is still not zoned for commercial purposes. And then I'm very concerned that the operation of a landscaping company with mounds of gravel and bark and vehicles and loaders and that sort of thing, that does not sit very well with a residential community. This is what Mr. Puffer is doing now. There are mounds of supplies, bark, gravel, sand, and there's equipment that's being used to load that equipment, trailers and all sorts of, frankly, unsightly things for a residential neighborhood. Some have given the justification, well, there's already commercial property right across the street at the storage unit. The storage unit predates most of the residential development in that area. And I do not think that the property values of the neighbors immediately adjacent to the properties being considered, the noise and the dust production, I do not feel that that's consistent with a fairly well-developed and established neighborhood. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Mike Smith. I reside at 1503 Appaloosa Avenue. I'm for item number 4 as well. My concerns are, I echo what Clarence Aldridge said, and also to add to that, I'm concerned about how many bikers and runners that go across Burton Lane right there. You know, if there's going to be big trucks and increase, I don't know if you guys are, if they're planning on doing a traffic study to make sure the impact that's going to cause on that area. It's already kind of tight in there coming around that loop, and it can be a little bit dangerous. You know, it's a sharp corner as you come around. We're a little concerned with big trucks, you know, pulling, you know, boulders and things like that. I think it could cause a safety issue for the residents in our neighborhood. And obviously, I'm concerned about, you know, the loud noises of the moving. I don't know what's going to go on. You know, I don't know if there's going to be boulders, big boulders that are going to be picked up and moved, and you know, and trucks going in and out. But so my concern is safety. To echo what Clarence said, but to add safety, that I think that we should really look at the traffic impact that's going to happen by having a commercial facility there. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Wesley Rahm. I live at 1471 Appaloosa. We've lived here for less than a year. We moved in the end of last summer, and before we purchased this house specifically, we did check the zoning map and saw that that was zoned residential. We would not have moved in if we saw that it was zoned commercial or industrial, because privacy is a very big issue to us. That's why we like this lot. It is a large lot. We feel that our home would definitely lose value, and all the homes on Appaloosa Avenue could lose value, and thus making all the homes in Sunset Equestrian lose their value also. We hear a lot of noise almost daily from the big trucks that are coming in and dumping gravel and whatnot. It is very loud. It shakes our house, rattles our windows. It always scares my kids. The fence along the bike trail has been severely damaged since the landscape company has come in. I just feel that if they are not taking care of the property now, what is it going to turn into? I did a quick drive-through before we came here. There's a large pile of garbage and debris about the size of this seating area back here. I just feel like if this is how they're starting off, it's going to just turn into a dump. I see trailers parked on the property, and they are positioned high enough and above the fence line, so it looks like I have a billboard in my backyard advertising Jim Puffer Landscaping Company. Again, this would cause our house to lose value for prospective buyers when we do sell. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Terrell Rahm, and I'm lucky enough to be married to this wonderful woman over here. As she said, we just moved in just about 8 months ago. We live about 10 feet west of the lot in question here, and this is why it's such an impact to us. I just want to reiterate that we were not notified in any way of this ordinance coming before the City Council or the Planning Commission. If it was, we would have probably half of Appaloosa here to be notified, and this was discussed with some of you, and I appreciate taking the phone calls of the members of our neighborhood that have spoken to you. Unfortunately, there was a mistake somewhere within the city planning that we were not notified. The people directly 10 feet west of this property were not notified, so we could fight this at the Planning Commission. But we thank you for letting us here tonight. Our main concerns are just everything that we've spoken to thus far. One thing to note is you recently resurfaced Burton Lane. Thank you for that. It's fantastic. But if you will notice, directly in front of Mr. Puffer's property, the road is already completely torn up and trashed because of the high traffic that is going through there. And it needs to be redone again. Here we are 2 months later. Again, that was not intended for commercial use at all. This is for residential, and we're already seeing the impacts on it. Again, as my wife said, we are impacted directly by the dirt and the dust and the rocks that are dumped and shaking our home. And also with, like Mr. Aldridge said, we're very concerned about how he's already operating on this property when it's not even zoned to be commercial yet. And that's something we would probably want to investigate because that was never brought again before the city or the residents. Lastly, this is a beautiful city and a beautiful neighborhood, and we're so happy to be here. You guys have done such a great job in the city, and that's why we moved specifically to this location. But as we said, if I'd have known that we were going to have a commercial property in our backyard, we would have not have moved here. But thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Sarah Thatcher. I don't have anything to do with that, but I just was recently called to the safety and welfare at Centennial Junior High, and so I'm here to regarding the roads in front of Centennial Junior High. I've seen the printout as to when you guys are going to possibly do road help on that area, and that's in 2 years. But we have currently 1580 students. Next year it's going to be 1,600 students. And I realize you guys have 3 junior highs, but the other 2 are under 1,000. So we have at least another 500-600 kids going there. And because their frontal lobe is not quite developed, they have impulsive and they don't really reason. So we have a lot of kids, and they go from the point A to point B they go for the straight line, as opposed to, I know you guys have done great on the rail trails and trying to get safe routes to school. However, I really would appreciate if we could possibly do something to expand Sunset Road between Old Mill and Centennial. If you guys could just put asphalt until we can get the money or funds available to put borders and sidewalks in, if we could just expand it with a white line, that would do, and Smith Lane is just incredibly busy right there at Centennial. It widens farther west, however, right there by Centennial, it's narrow, and so you have cars parking. So I don't know if to wait 2 years, at that point you're gonna have both junior highs open up at that point. And this is the summer months, so if this could possibly be done this summer just to expand the roads, that would be the best possible solution. I would think to just expand it for us with a white line would take a lot of the traffic that's over there and a lot of the people that are kids that are walking, because it just gets madness. And so anyways, I would hope that you'd be able to do something for us. I know that when we did Angel, if you expanded it right off, which really helped as kids were walking down Angel before we were able to get the sidewalks. So that just would alleviate a lot of the congestion, I think, if we could just get the kids more farther off of the roads and the cars where they know where to drive back and forth with that white line. I know when you widen the road, you increase the speed, and so maybe to fund this project, you could get tickets. I don't know, but it just needs to be done, and I was hoping that it might be able to get done this summer so that we're ready for the next 2 years before those other schools. Because I guess Mr. Hogue says we basically gain about 100 kids each year, and then they're definitely developing over off of Angel. So I think the route or the rate of increase of kids might be increasing. So I'd really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mine isn't pertaining to either one. My name's Gladys Moore, and I've been here several times talking about the piece of property that's right in back of my house that's on Crestwood. So my house is on 30 East, 400 North, and Dan Stevenson wants to build that property. You want to put in all those condominium or townhomes, but it's under an acre, and from what I understand, they're going to put 5 houses, so that would be 1/5 of an acre for each house, but that would include the roads too. Yet, I think that's putting quite a few, that's really cramming them in there, and he wants to have them 400,000 square feet, or 4,000 square feet, and I think that's a lot of buildings going on in that small space, and I just wondered why he's going to be able to put those houses on 1/5 of an acre that would include the roads also, where I don't think there's that many houses around that are on 1/5 of an acre with roads in front. Just wanted to see what you guys said about that. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll try and answer that for you as well tonight.
I wasn't planning on talking, but Sarah inspired me. My name is Randy Von Bosi. I have been on the community council out in West Kaysville for 3 years now, and in that time, we've met with Andy and Shane since he got here multiple times about the roads out there. Some of our concerns have been resolved as far as Snow Horse getting our kids safely to school, and that's been wonderful. But as Sarah mentioned, right now, Sunset, especially from Old Mill over to Centennial, is a very big hazard. We have a lot of kids that just cross directly there. There's no sidewalks. The road is not wide enough. People are parking everywhere and driving crazy. We have been meeting with anybody who'd listened to us for about the last 6 to 8 months. And the answers we've always gotten back is, well, we'll wait until summer, we'll wait until summer. And with the tentative budget that's come out, what we've gotten back is, well, it might be a couple more years. And for us out dealing with these kids and getting their safe routes established, this is a really big concern. And if there's a way to take the public works budget and somehow allocate at least some of that money so that these kids are not in danger every day, would be fabulous. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other items for call to the public? All right, seeing none, we'll close call to the public, and a couple just quick things. We'll try and address the Crestwood question as we move through the meeting. The conversations about Centennial Junior High that were brought up by Randy and Sarah, I think are probably ones that would be relatively easy to ask staff to maybe come up with I certainly don't want it necessarily to be a Band-Aid. When we did Angel Street, and Ms. Thatcher was very involved in helping raise some innovative, anything from a bake sale to a cow patty bedding. Anyway, it was very interesting. But it was successful, and we had worked with both Snow Horse and Centennial to decide. We've got Centennial down to Western, you've got Centennial up to Wits End and over to Old Mill, and you've got Angel Street. Those are all 3 big priorities. Which one should we focus on first? And the community councils of both schools decided that Angel was the most critical. That being said, that was several years ago, and we're probably to the point where at least we would be interested. It would be is your recommendation that you came here tonight part of a recommendation from the community council for focusing? Okay.
I'm also the PTA, part of the PTA, and that's why I kind of originally came. But the school's been open 6 years.
Right.
So it's needing to be done.
So we'll try and come up with something and coordinate with the community councils as well. Ideally, any requests for improvements to safe routes, saying, this is our most critical need, is supposed to be, as per the state's SNAP plan, is supposed to be requested to the city from the schools community council. But, you know, I don't want to overdo it with just official. I think we can look at some options, but that would be as we did several years ago, and both of you were involved with quite a bit. We'll probably make that request as well, but in the meantime, I think we can also look at some options. Thank you for that. All right, the next item on our agenda is ordinance 1741, rezone of 0.96 acres of property at 85 East Crestwood Road to include the PRUD, Planned Residential Unit Development Overlay Zone. Mr. Thompson.
This property's been reviewed previously, and a final plat approval has been granted. The request was to put 5 units on the property serviced by a private lane. As we can see here, those lots do all meet the requirements of the R18 zone, which it currently sits. Part of the process, though, with the private lane, it requires a PRUD overlay zone. That zone is typically applied after the final plat's approved. We don't want PRUD overlays hanging out there without any plat tied to them. So after the plat's approved, we approve the PRUD overlay zone. So that's the action that's necessary at this point, is just to complete this and formalize it as the PRUD overlay zone needs to be applied to allow for the private lane.
So remind us briefly, Andy, what has brought us to this point, what public discussions and actions the council has taken that bring us to this point.
This has gone through several public meetings. They requested a rezone almost a year ago. Went through. Their initial desire was to put 12 lots on the property. The neighborhood felt like that was not compatible, and there was plenty of high-density housing in the neighborhood. They went back and came in with a 8-unit plan requesting a R2 zone. Through the discussions and the public hearings, there was somewhat of a consensus that if they could be 5 lots on that, they could get approved. So they went back again and redesigned it. Again, the property was already zoned R18. This meets the R18 zoning. It went through the preliminary plat, public hearing, and received the recommendation for the PRUD overlay zone through the Planning Commission. They came back then with a final plat, which has also been approved by both the Planning Commission and City Council. And this is just the final step to give final authorization to that overlay zone to allow for the private road. The plat's in compliance with the provisions outlined in that zone.
So the question that was asked by Ms. Moore relates to 5th acre or so lots and how well maybe you could just talk to us about how we determine home size. We probably look at that and say a 4,000 square foot home on a 5th acre lot. What?
They have to meet all the setback requirements, just like any other subdivision does. In this case, it's the backyards are here, so that'll be a 15-foot setback is required. It's 20 feet from the road and 8 foot on the side yards. That's the exact same requirements that all the homes around them are required to meet. So it's intended to not be a drastic change, but it does allow for the private road. Our ordinance currently allows the private road to be included in the lot area. So it is correct, the usable area of those lots is 6,000 or 7,000 square feet rather than the 8,000, but that's provided for in the private lane subdivision. 4,000 square foot homes, obviously that's probably total space under the roof. I don't think a 4,000 square foot home could meet those setback requirements if it was all one level. And that's not a requirement of the subdivision.
You just have to meet the ordinance.
You have to meet the ordinance.
Chairman?
Question from the council?
Maybe we discussed it. Did we go through the history of where this project was originally? I want to be sensitive to this fine lady's concerns. Originally, it was what, 12 units, right, the proposal?
The original application was for rezone to a R4 zone, and their concept plan showed 12 units. That's correct.
Which we kicked
Turned
out.
down, yeah.
That was not
Big time.
approved.
So we're
Then it
trying
went-
to,
then it went to 7.
Keep it
trying
to,
to minimize and.
yeah.
And I think it's important to note, even though it's considered a rezone, the action that's before us tonight, that's more of a technicality. We're actually not changing the zoning from R18. It
That's-
meets all the R18, but it's a PRUD overlay zone because of the private lane
That's correct.
situation there. That's required by the ordinance. If you have a private lane subdivision, you must have a PRUD.
That's correct, yes.
So,
That's right.
yeah, so it's not technically a rezone in terms of changing the overall density or the zoning in the area. And 5, as you mentioned, 5 units in this particular spot of ground does meet the ordinance in terms of density.
Okay. Any questions from council? Additional questions from staff? A little bit of a history if you're prepared for some action, more than welcome to.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve the rezone of .96 acres of property to include a PUD overlay zone for 85 East Crestwood Road.
I'll second.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Page and a second by Councilmember Garn as outlined. Any further discussion?
Quickly, Andy, when we do a private road, the road has to be constructed to the city standards, correct? It follows the same warranty periods, the same punch list
Yes.
regimen.
Yeah.
But sometimes doesn't, sidewalk is or isn't required.
As far as construction standards, it has to meet the city requirements. The width and the design of the surface improvements, like you're talking sidewalk, width of the road, they can be varied from the standard of a public street.
Yeah.
The sidewalk may or may not be required, just.
That's correct.
All right, any additional discussion? Councilmember Garn, will you start a vote, please?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Voting is unanimous. The next on our agenda is ordinance 1742, rezone of 1.53 acres of property at approximately 1450 South and Burton Lane, from R120 Single Family Residential to LI Light Industrial. Mr. Thompson.
This property is located on the corner of Burton Lane and Deseret Drive. It's highlighted here in yellow. Originally, this property was designated as open space for the Old Mill Village subdivision. They had extra open space. They also created some extra or reduced the requirement for open space when they placed a church on several of the lots. So the subdivision as a whole is still in compliance with the open space provisions without this property. As has been mentioned, it was acquired by a landscaping company several months ago. They've been storing extra product on the property. As they've looked at the use of that, they see that use growing rather than maintaining where it's at. In response to that, we have suggested to them if they want to continue to grow the use of that property, the residential zone probably is not adequate. It'd be adequate for where they started and the minor things. They've probably grown already to a point where it's starting to get questionable. So at this point, we're suggesting that they either reduce the operation there or they otherwise make it legal. They do have visions of using that property to a higher level, up to and including potentially putting a building on it, which would not be allowed currently. Excuse me. So they've requested the light industrial zone. You can see on the zoning map, there is that type of zoning in the vicinity. It's the power substation and the storage sheds are there to the north. This property's a little bit isolated. This is a high embankment. There's the rail trail to the west of it. This is about 60 feet wide in that area. So the property Does have a 60-foot buffer from the properties to the west with the rail trail corridor. The property lines don't go to the trail. They're significantly set back from that. So this was, the request is to rezone it to light industrial, which would allow them to continue to grow what they're doing there. Planning Commission reviewed this, held a public hearing. Apparently the neighbors on the west side of the tracks, our policy, the state law requires that it's posted in the paper and posted on the property. As all the state law requires, council's asked us in the past to send out a notice to abutting property owners. Unfortunately, because of the rail trail corridor in between, we didn't consider those abutting property owners, and that's why they did not receive a direct notice. Whether that's right or wrong is a different issue, but that's what happened. So, Planning Commission reviewed it. They voted to recommend approval of the light industrial zone. There was one dissenting vote. He made it clear after the vote that he did not vote because he was opposed to the light industrial zone. He was opposed to the conditions that the Planning Commission had required to go along with the property as far as the growth of the business. I think those are outlined in the staff report. Recommended that the use would essentially stay the same as it is now. There would be some trees planted around the perimeter of the property to help buffer it. I think there were some regulations on signage as well. So with those requirements, those provisions that would be added with the development agreement, the Planning Commission recommended approval again. It was 6-1 on that one dissenting vote. Said, I think that's too many requirements, rather than I'm not satisfied with the zoning.
I have a couple of, I'd have to go back and try and recall what the intent was. We talked about notifying abutting property owners at what point, and I think I was recalling that we made an amendment in our ordinance to require, but maybe it was just council guidance. If it isn't, I'd maybe invite the council to revisit that. But this kind of a technicality would be more reason, and sometimes we learn from reasons, to have that be a distance from the property. Maybe notify all property owners within 500 feet so that we don't miss that kind of a, because normally if we're saying, hey, notify everybody within abutting property, clearly this was an exception where technicality messed that up. And so I would just express that as a concern. The Planning Commission's recommendation, at least it says here, that the motion included a recommendation that the rezone be subject to a development agreement, which would require a fence to remain on the west property line, that it's at least 6 feet in height, trees to be planted along the corridor, no signage allowed. Any future use of change of use requires amendment to the development agreement, and the zone extended across the trail to allow building near the property line. The applicant expressed he was comfortable with these conditions. The only other problematic issue I see is an approval of a rezone subject to a development agreement that hasn't been written. And that becomes, I think, an issue. If you're approving a rezone subject to a development agreement that isn't actual language. I know in the past the City Council has approved rezones subject to development agreements that we've actually seen and said, yeah, we like that this says, and we like that. And so I don't get a vote in these matters, so sometimes I talk a little too much for someone who doesn't get to vote. But I just wanted to point those two things out, as lack of a development agreement and maybe a little bit of due diligence going back and maybe fulfilling the intent of the council guidance, or what I thought was an ordinance on property notifications. Anytime someone says, hey, we didn't get notified, and then especially if staff says, yeah, they didn't get notified because of a technicality, that's always a little bit concerning. And I think it might have been Mr. Vernon who emailed and referenced that a little bit earlier tonight as well, which I actually agree with. So, sorry. That's fine.
I guess the question that I had too was, anybody even notified on this? I mean,
the abutting property owners, the The home here was notified and the home over here.
There isn't a home. That's Jordan Valley Water District. That's a governmental entity, but I don't think they care if they're notified.
Yeah, I mean, every one of those are vacant lots except for,
The one home.
yeah, well, yeah.
I don't want to barge in. Larry, are you
No, go ahead.
still commenting? All right, I've got a few questions I could use some help with. First of all, could we have a look at the conditional use permit that was given? So people understand, I'll do my best to put this in layman's terms, but we're looking at an R120 zone in the yellow right now. Annie, could you zoom out a little bit, please? I want to also be fully disclosing here of where I live. Anyway, I live a few blocks away on Western Drive, down by Sunset Drive. So everything you're seeing there, you know, save the church, the storage units, the bulk of what you're seeing here is R120. Okay, so R120 doesn't permit what's currently being, the property's currently being used for right now. Now, perhaps there was a swelling of use. I've tried to do my due diligence and do some discovery, and you know, I guess that there was an idea tossed out. Hey, if I buy this, could I store some personal landscaping gear on it if I buy it? And perhaps there was a comment made, well, at your own risk, you could maybe do that. You know, if you know, minimal, personal. Okay, I believe those were the adjectives used, and perhaps that's what led us here today. Intentional or not, that's not up to me to judge. But we're stuck now. Well, I think essentially where we are right now is the horse is not halfway to the trough. He's in the trough, and his reins are chained to the trough. You know, others call this camel zoning. You know, once the camel's head is in the tent, he's not backing out. So I think we have a real, I feel kind of terrible that we're almost backed into a corner. And, you know, when you back someone into a corner so toughly, and you don't leave a back door, they're coming out through the front door through you. And that's essentially, you know, what these folks are trying to do today. They're like, hey, the UTA corridor, I disagree. That's publicly owned property, essentially. It's owned by UTA, you know, governmental entity. So, I mean, these folks have a share in that, just like the rest of us. You know, what that share may be, who knows? But, you know, to say, well, you're beyond the rail trail. Well, as we've heard testimony, they can still hear it, see it, feel it. Okay, we're talking about boulders being dumped out. I'm a former excavation contractor. I understand the amount of noise that's going to come in place. There's other things too, like bins have been constructed to hold gravel, bark, things of that nature. So we have more than storage, we have a business going on here. We're way out of the bounds of use. I ran out of time and was going to investigate what the laws are for breaking zoning laws in the state of Utah. I'm sure that they are stiff. And, you know, I'm not here to be stiff, but I'm here to say I believe we need to back up. We have examples in the city just recently, 2015. There was a mechanic shop down on Sunset Drive, okay, and he went through the front door with his business. He came here. He got a conditional use. By the way, is there a conditional use permit? That was phrased as a question, so there's not. Okay, so perhaps a failure there. But the mechanic shop came, and he came through the front door. He says, here's what I want to do. Here's what I'm proposing. Does it fit? If not, how can I make it fit? And we approved it. There was a conditional use permit granted. The business swelled, had success beyond what the owner perhaps anticipated. And what did the city do? We kicked him out. Now tonight, we're looking at just saying, hey, go ahead and come in the back door. Go ahead and, you know, and I'm not trying to poke or you know, make any polarizations here, but it looks that way. You know, so what are we to do now? Are we to be the bad guy? We have cement poured in those bins. Andy, I sent you an email. Do you mind pulling that up? It's in your Kaysville inbox. It should be. I'll continue while you pull that up. Just let me know when you have it. Are we kind of boxed into a position, you know, similar to the mechanic shop? I don't think we got boxed into that, though. I think that was above board. But you also have a barn down on Sunset Drive. I'll try and leave names. Well, Steve wouldn't mind. Steve Mitchell's barn. And he offers it up for free. Actually just had a wedding there last week. It was awesome. I got to attend. It's great. But that kind of got boxed out of town a little bit. And that's a really neat thing. It's a free place. It's a very unique barn. R&R Barbecue catered it, and the owner came personally because he knows the groom's father, and he says, I could get $2,000 a night for this barn. Now, coming back out of the weeds, I mean, here's a guy's, that's the caliber of how nice and antiquated, of an antique that barn is. But we've kind of boxed it out. Okay, and that's a nice thing. I mean, that's an amenity. And here we are kind of, go ahead, Andy, do you have it pulled up?
I'm not sure what you're looking for exactly.
I just emailed you some pictures. I hope they came through. Did they?
I haven't seen anything from you. I've got some pictures of the property.
You have current pictures of the property?
Yes.
Oh, as of today?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. If you wouldn't mind starting to pull this up. Because I've heard also that, I think actually in our report here, it said there's no signage that will be allowed. Oh, these look like mine. Okay, so here it is. Does this look like personal property to anyone in the room? You have massive piles of boulder. Now, you've got a trailer over in the corner that is billboarded. Andy, there should be another one. It took me 3 shots to get it all in. But there should be another one of the south property line. There, thank you. Okay, signage. First of all, that trailer, full disclosure, I know Jim Puffer too, just like the other gentleman here tonight. I call him Puff Daddy. Puff, this is not about you, okay? So forgive me. But you can't have that. That's a sign. That's not a sign, it's a billboard. And quite frankly, look at these bins. How is all that constructed without a conditional use permit in an R120? This is not even close to a permissible use in an R120. We cannot allow this to happen. Here's what's going to happen. And let me back up before I go there. A friend of mine had an experience where he went and he got a business license in the city, just primarily for a basement office, but he was in the construction industry, had heavy equipment, trucks, things of that nature. Well, he was absolutely restricted, and it's not too far from here, restricted from any outside storage. No equipment could be brought home because it's R120, it's not light ag. Now, light ag is different. You have a residential light ag where some of this could fit in. But none of that could come into an R120 zone. But here we have it here. Why? Because we think this is some wasteland remnant. Well, that doesn't matter. My relatives of mine are in the developing industry, and they have been for quite some time. They've been in Kaysville for almost 40 years now. There's not one deal that you would ever see my dad enter into on a speculation that he will get zoning for a piece of property. There's no cash entering that deal until a contract, the land is locked up on paper with a contingency. If I get my zoning, I will purchase it. Now, that's perhaps what should have happened here. And then beyond that, what should have happened is, notifying a governmental agency that we're doing something, 300-400 feet away from their land. They don't care. Jordan Valley's plans for that is they're going to rip a pipeline in 20, 30, 40 years. It's the 100-year Salt Lake Water Plan. They're just doing it, to sell the lots off, use the increase to help pay for the pipeline, and have less homeowners in the way. They don't care. Now, the one homeowner to the south was notified. Look at this picture, folks. If those were your homes, would you feel like the UTA buffer really should restrict you from being notified? Those windows have a perfect bird's eye view. Those windows have a great bird's eye view. So do the next as we go on down.
I don't think anyone's disputing that they should have been notified.
Well, maybe I should back up, and maybe I should offer a motion. Maybe I'm missing the feeling of the council here. I've received feedback from folks who have spoken with this council today who felt like this was already a done deal. Maybe I'm wrong, so I would actually like to repent of that if I could, and perhaps just make a motion to find out where we stand. I would make a motion, unless anyone else, I guess there's still a comment period, but I would make a motion that this gets kicked back to Planning Commission completely. It starts over. public notification process. I'm not knocking our staff. They're wonderful. They try. They do a great job. But we kick it back. We start over. And I like what Chairman said earlier on about the notification process. For a long time now, and I think staff's all in agreement, I think staff's really trying to work hard to find better mediums of communication with the people. But until we get that medium, an idea that has been thrown out previously is, what if we took some staff, you know, maybe some real cheerful staff in Park and Recs, and after hours, between like 5:30 and 7:30, when people are actually home from work, they went around this, like Mayor said, with a circumference, you know, or staff determines, okay, we believe this area will be affected, and they literally go door to door with a list. Now, they don't get into anything, so they don't have to get in confrontations with people, but they just say, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, I have a zoning newsletter for you. It potentially affects you, and I just need to hand it to you and check off that you received it. You know, until we figure out a better medium. I understand that might be rudimentary in the technological age, but perhaps it confirms that people are seeing that. I heard that the sign, the zoning sign, got blown over. You know, and we've heard testimony tonight that no one had a clue that this was going on. So my motion would be, kick it back to Planning Commission, proper notice, everyone's notified, and they have a chance to come and do their rightful due diligence as people. So we table it. Well, I don't know if it should be a tabling. It's kind of a reboot, start it over.
I would say table it.
Yeah, that's a
Table
question.
with start over.
If the council denies the rezone, that closes the door for 12 months. A table would technically be a table of the council. So I think the action would be to direct it back. I mean, I think the specific, and you can correct me, Andy, if I'm wrong, but I think the specific recommendation would be to refer it back to the Planning Commission, notify neighbors. If we don't have it in our ordinance, you know, that might be a subsequent motion, a separate motion if the council wants to make that, but notify neighbors within a certain reasonable distance. Then, you know, I think you could give that, but I'm not sure tabling it here, just tabling it's not going to send it back to the Planning Commission if that's what you want to do.
I think that motion is appropriate. We've done that in the past, send it back for further review based on new information.
It's specific notice.
In all due fairness to PC, they didn't have anyone come. In all due fairness to the residents, they weren't aware. So I think it definitely merits a reboot. I mean, I guess the alternative would be to put a moratorium of 12 months on it and deny it. But I don't personally like that either, because I don't think that resolves what's already going on in breaking of the zone today. Now, potentially, if we study that thing out, there could be some concrete demolition going on. And that's, it ought to do a full reboot. It ought to go back to grass and start out with some personal gear, you know, put a couple snowmobile trailers in there that don't have labeling on them. You know, I mean.
Well, I think if we wanted to make that would be the first step is to, if that's the direction you want to head. We probably can't get ahead of ourselves. Well, we can't. Well, a couple of things. You mentioned the mechanics shop on Sunset, and part of what changed there is, and that was really a complicated issue. Part of what changed is that it was a home use business, and then the owner moved out from the property, so it was no longer a home based business, and there were some things that changed that created a problem. I think the same kind of, I think some of what you've said I would actually agree with as far as, and I don't mean some to don't read into that, but there seems like a lot of work has taken place on something but if like we did with the mechanic at that point, said you've done a lot of improvements and you've done a lot of things, you're more than welcome to present this to the city council so that you don't have to tear anything down and see what happens. This seems a little more noticeable, if that's the right word, and I think the recommendation was probably the same. You're more than welcome to send this to the city council and see what happens. But that's probably is our first step. If ultimately the city council determines not to grant a rezone and just says, no, we don't think this is works with the area, then typically it would be staff's next point to say, okay, we need you to make these modifications to bring it back into to compliance. But that's probably your first step. I think you were started to head that way, to refer it back to the Planning Commission, and probably would be beneficial to give a distance. And you know, I don't know what that should be, but 500 feet, 1,000 feet, I mean, that's pretty far. But I would love to see that as part of the ordinance, because it becomes just so confusing. And like I said, I thought we had that addressed, and then we have something like this. But Ryan is, I don't want to say everything appears easy to Ryan, because he can just do a lot of, but he's able to take a map of the city and draw a circle, and then download names and addresses. And I mean, it's relatively simple. If we know what the distance is, I think it would be great. But that's a separate motion. But do you want to finish your motion, Councilmember?
Just further perspective, I appreciate your comments and agree. You know, in a kind of a comparison to the mechanic shop, it now sits vacant. And I happen to have got to know the fellow who owned and operated that now, and he's carrying the mortgage of that and the mortgage of his new home on Burton Lane. And he's you know, I think he would be okay with my candidness here. He's not commercial Jim Puffer landscaping. He turned his own wrenches kind of guy. He ran that shop. That was livelihood, period. It wasn't just some convenience, because this is 2 miles down the road from his home on the mountain in Fruit Heights. It was livelihood. And Mayor, you're right. I mean, I know we moved out, and I know sometimes we look for an angle, right? Oh, you did that, so okay, you're out. Now we're satisfied. We got that out of the neighborhood. But you know, he's burdened with the mortgage. So I agree with you. He's burdened with the shop mortgage now, and you know, this is not anywhere near the burden of constructing a shop to say you got to erase all this. You got to go back. You know, this, because quite frankly, this is a violation, I'm going to dare say, of Utah state law and Kaysville City policy and ordinance.
And unfortunately, so was the mechanic. I mean, it wasn't an angle. It was a violation of the ordinance. But you're right, the exact same way. If this ends up not being rezoned, like that wasn't rezoned, that was exactly what he would be left with.
We've done it before, and we set the precedence there. Yeah, you know, and this mechanic could have been, what's a good word to use? He could have been clever. I'll use clever instead of a weasel. I'll use clever. He could have been clever and said, okay, I'm going to put my cousin, who's one of my mechanic foremans, on my LLC, and I'm going to move him into the house. Well, he's no part owner of the business, but he didn't do that. You know, he was honest, and he says, okay, I'll go. And he's still hurt, but everything he did was through the front door. And there wasn't any kind of, cleverness, and so.
Well, the city did not kick him out. He had a choice to become compliant, and he chose not to, because he wanted to grow, which is great. But where he was living was residential, and it wasn't zoned general commercial. And
did you just make my pitch for the argument here?
Right.
Boo, yeah.
Exactly. But,
thank you.
But I want to make sure people know we're not in the business of kicking people out of their business.
Correct.
We're in the business of making sure that people are in compliance.
Oh, I fully agree. Because we look at this, we don't represent Jim Puffer. This body does not represent Jim Puffer. Now, if you lived in Kaysville, maybe different, but still breaking the law. We represent these people, all of you. And our interests are to say, hey, wait a minute, these guys moved in under this zoning framework, and now this crept in with no due diligence, so, yeah.
So are you prepared to make a motion?
Yeah, I'm prepared to make a motion. Help me word it if you don't mind. It seems like we're all, you know, we're unsure. The motion will be this. I propose that we take this item and send it back through Planning Commission, a complete redo, and also an addendum to that would be that we make sure we have full disclosure, whether that be door knocking. I'd love to see us try that out, you know, with a list of folks, or at least make sure it's hanging on their door. That's a beat up motion. So, Andy, why don't you clean it up for me?
Since I'll have to recognize it, maybe I'll try and summarize it.
Thanks. Let's do it this way. As I understand it, the motion is to revert this back to the Planning Commission, start the process all over with a new public hearing, meeting the standard notification requirements, plus direct notification to the homes within 500 feet.
Can we get a head nod over here? 500 feet would probably get you, I don't know, I'd go further, I'd say at least 1,000.
You'd like more?
At least, Mayor said 1,000, let's go 1,000. Price is right.
Actually, I think I said 500, but you can,
I think
you can
usually
pick
it's
whatever,
500.
which one I said that suits your.
500. I think 500 is reasonable.
500 would get.
You do 1,000, it could be a lot of people.
Okay, we could maybe get a responsible rectangle around
And
that.
this direct recommendation doesn't become our new ordinance, but certainly is probably something for us to consider. We talked about going out a certain distance just on standard notifications for conditional use permits and for rezones. And I really thought we were a distance, if the understanding was abutting property owners, abutting is probably not going to be much more than 500 anyway, but it is those situations where you have, and I don't mean to pick on one of your houses, but you have someone here that's looking to rezone, and the folks that live over here never drive that street, and the only thing they see is a sign. They're saying, I never drive down that road. Why would I know? The intent was to say, okay, anybody, if someone here on Appaloosa is going to rezone, then we take a 500 foot diameter and notice everyone within it. But
My only thought would be that with the exposure level of this, I think we need a broad scope, because it does affect quite a few people. It affects vision, ground moving, sound, dust for the immediate folks, but it also has an environmental impact on a greater radius than just the immediate folks around it. People are already commenting like, what is going on there? What's next?
And are we talking about, and the other reason why I think maybe, and I really don't, whatever distance you want to do, but if we're talking about 1,000 feet from this point, and then 1,000 feet from this point, and 1,000 feet from this point, I mean, are we?
I would recommend a 500-foot radius from the center of the subject property. That'll get at least 2 layers of houses deep.
Yeah, it would.
I could go 800. Do you want to meet in the middle?
650?
I sold a lawnmower on KSL today, man. I'm negotiating move. 750. Let's span it out a little.
I just think, 500 feet gives you a very good sample, and they would be the residents that are closest to the subject property in any case. Not that other people's opinions would not be important, and sometimes I know in neighborhoods when these zoning issues have come up over the years, it does spread. When it's an important issue, the whole neighborhood gets together and they talk about it. But I think 500 feet would be sufficient to accomplish the purpose, just talking about it from a scientific perspective maybe, or a statistical perspective rather than a political perspective. But
I agree.
And obviously, there'll be the notice sign. That doesn't restrict it to those folks coming to the PC. That's just guaranteed. You're basically get a certified letter in the mail.
Well, this
And
is
there's a cost factor to that as well, I think, right?
Yeah, we don't want to certify it.
You go a whole lot of houses, and that pretty quickly escalates the cost.
So then we ought to be
getting it.
charging that to
Somebody
the
pick a
property
number.
owner.
For heck's sake,
So,
pick a number, 500,
I think
750, and let's
500
get
is a
this
good
motion
number.
voted on, because, I mean, this is not the long-term ordinance,
No,
this
no,
is a
no.
one-time,
for
this is
this
just for
one
this
time.
project.
Yeah.
So,
655?
Okay, he said it. 6:55 it is. It's over.
Okay. No,
okay, sounds like everyone,
please don't let it be 6:55, because my sarcasm now is gonna become an official action. I can
my
just
goodness.
feel that. for the
Well,
rest of
my
life.
opinion is that, and let's be consistent, even though it's temporary, so I would suggest 500 feet.
do it
Good.
always.
I agree.
Great.
I think
Sounds great.
it's sufficient.
Andy had an awesome worded motion. We'll just verbatim that again with 500 foot, and that'll be my motion.
All right.
Thank you, Andy, for the help.
Okay.
And I'll second the motion, but I'd just like to make one brief comment on this, that every situation is so different. As I look at these, obviously the same rules apply, the same zones apply, and we obviously strive for consistency and fairness in every case, but there are differences in the way all the facts present themselves, as the mayor pointed out in the mechanic situation. So I think it's maybe not so helpful to compare one to another, except in where it actually applies, because otherwise we're comparing apples and oranges, or we're not comparing the same thing. And in this case, I think, to Councilmember Adams' point, given what happened, it makes perfect sense to send it back to Planning Commission, have the hearing. But the decision should really be made based on how it impacts the surrounding area, zero-based, and it is, I'm not saying I even completely have an assessment at this point of which way I would go, because I want to see what the planning commission does, what the comments are and all that, but you do have some light industrial there. And so, my point is that you're looking at all these factors, surrounding factors, and trying to make the right decision, the highest and best use of this particular property. And so that's my only point, is you have to consider each situation uniquely.
Yeah, and just one comment. I think the thing we have going for us, these people are reasonable. And to be honest with you, Jim Puffer, I know him, he's reasonable too. I think it's going to be where there will be communication and be able to vent it out and talk. And so I think that this is a good process.
Well, maybe a recess from what's going on here completely, Yeah, I agree. Like Jeff had the whole, nobody's living on premises anymore, the mechanic shop, but this started out illegal, so there could be an equal punishment here, even though everyone's nice guys. We can't let that rule the roost, so.
One question, which was not part of the motion, but I guess I'd like to know if you want it. The recommendation was subject to a development agreement. If the Planning Commission opts to refer it back to the City Council for consideration after appropriate notice is given, do you want to see that with a development agreement in hand?
Yes.
Not a bunch of terminology that could be in a development agreement or subject to an agreement that we're not seeing?
Yeah, I think we'd like to see a full proposal of what comes back, and
Just,
it might go back to weeds.
I don't disagree with that, but just so you're aware, under our normal schedule, the Planning Commission reviewed this last Thursday. Your packet comes out Friday morning. So if you want the
Sometimes.
development agreement with the rezone, there'll be a gap between the meetings, which there's been some concern with consistency and letting people know when it would come forward. So I don't have a problem with it, but it won't be the following week. It would be probably the next city council after that. And we can make that clear so that
a month out, we're in budget season, we're gonna need some time too, 4 to 6 weekends.
Well, and I
Pushed
think
out.
the planning commission meeting was canceled, the next one. I saw a notice go out that it was canceled.
Well, frankly, I'm.
Just so you understand that.
Yeah.
Sure, I think that's understandable. The timing for me is not for this particular situation. I understand it would be important for Mr. Puffer, and rightfully so. But I'm not so sure I'm that worried about, the timing of it per se. Given the fact that the use on the property has somewhat grown in a way that I think is a little questionable and maybe raises some eyebrows as to, on R120. So I'm not really that worried about that, so.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I think the development agreement part, we probably don't need to reword it, but is probably clear direction. Councilmember Adams, would you like to start a vote?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Voting is unanimous. The next on our agenda is ordinance 1743, rezone of 1.66 acres of property at 373 East Shepherd Lane from R120 single-family residential to R1LD single-family residential low-density zoning district.
We may also consider the next item as in conjunction with this.
Thank you. Item number 6, which is preliminary plat for the Anglers Cove subdivision at 373 East Shepherd Lane.
Property's highlighted here on the map. It's on the corner of 350 East and Shepherd Lane. About an acre and a half, a little more than an acre and a half of property. It's got currently one existing residence on it. The request is to rezone this to R1LD with the intent of further subdividing it. I'd like to do 3 lots on the little over an acre and a half, which meets the 2 unit per acre criteria that we have for the west side of town. However, the location of the existing home, they would like to stay on just a little bit less than an acre and do the 2 lots on about 17,000 square foot lots. So because they're less than the 20,000 square feet, it needs to go to the LD zoning. The frontage would still be the same, so the 3,000 or 4,000 square feet would come off the backyard. Seems to be compatible with the area. You can see the zoning map. There's a lot of R120 in the vicinity. The lots from the front would appear the same as an R120. The frontage and the setbacks are the same. This would just allow them a little flexibility to keep the existing home in place and still get the density that otherwise would be allowed. So the first request is to rezone it to the LD zone, and then the 3-lot subdivision as currently drawn complies with that R1LD zoning.
And could you just remind us, we seem like we had conversation about improvements on this property in the past. What
about this?
At the current time, the plat shows full improvements around the property. There's,
great.
They may request that later, but right now it's shown on the preliminary plat.
Now, with this, the notices were sent out
Yes.
to where?
It would have been the
Thornton Valley Water.
the same criteria. It would have been adjacent properties.
All the neighboring properties, the adjoining
So
properties.
there would have been more than 2, maybe
Okay.
5.
Nobody had any counterpoints?
There's no comment at the public hearing.
Is the existing home, or is the developer who lives in the existing home now, is the developer the existing owner of the whole parcel?
Yes.
Awesome, I like that, because this R1LD, it's a great concept, and, you know, it's fitting into West Kaysville. It seems to be, it doesn't seem to be a huge uproar, you know, but anyone who's new to the R1LD, it's an ebb and flow. So West Kaysville is generally a half-acre, you know, lot you have to have, but a developer can come in and say, I'll give you all this open space over here, or, well, let me shrink that comparison down. On a 2-acre parcel, you could, you know, generally yield 4 lots, give or take. But you could say, all right, I'm going to do, you know, a bigger lot over here, then I'm going to do 2, 3 smaller lots over here. You can kind of ebb and flow as long as you net out at, you know, 1 home per half acre. The one thing why I'm feeling very satisfied that is the existing owner of the entire parcel, and he lives in the home, right? I think that's great. I think, you know, it's when a developer comes in and says, hey, Mr. Homeowner over here, I'll buy all this land that you don't really need. Would you take a few $1,000, you know, whatever agreement they make, and hey, would you let me plat in, because you're going to keep an acre, I just need a little more to be able to develop this and get 2 lots instead of 1. Would you take a few bucks and let me make a deal with you and let me put you into my subdivision? That I don't like, so I'm glad he lives there. Rest my case. That's all I got.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that we approve the rezone of 1.66 acres of property from R120 to R1LD and grant preliminary plat approval for Anglers Cove subdivision.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Snell and a second by Councilmember Page as outlined. Any further discussion? Just wanted to clarify that you mentioned that right now it shows the full improvements, but they may come back and request something. As it stands right now, the council doesn't need to specify improvements. It would be an exception if they were to consider it in the future.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
All right. All right. Any other discussion?
Just last comment. It's right next to Nora's place too, right? And Andy, which is very comparable.
There's the home in between.
What? The Nora's place, yeah, right there, that
It's up
development.
here. There's 1 or 2 lots in between.
So it's got similar zoning right next to it already, and
Yeah, again,
Nora's is already smaller. And
similar zoning all around it.
cool.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee, will you start a vote?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Voting is unanimous. Next on our agenda is preliminary plat approval for Cityside Townhome subdivision at 265 North, 200 West, and at 209 West, 300 North. Mr. Thompson.
This may sound familiar to you, because you reviewed this once before, it went through the process, at least through preliminary plat, and the developer pulled away. It's a new developer now with interest. This is the post office and the grocery store. Property is located just to the west across the street. Currently, there are 2 single-family residential homes on it. There's what's commonly called the Wad Square development behind it of apartments. Property is currently zoned RM, which allows for residential multifamily dwellings. It allows up to about 12 units per acre actually, I think 13 and a half units if you go to full density. So the request is to develop 12 units on this about an acre of property, which does meet the RM zoning. And we saw essentially the same plan before and approved preliminary plat approval for it. Would be 3 buildings with 4 units each. Each unit would be separately platted so that it could be sold separately. Common space everywhere else, so they'd share the parking and the grass areas around it. Again, it complies with the RM zoning.
I know it doesn't always land this way, but this is actually one circumstance where it just seems very appropriately situated.
Oh, it is.
When you look at a higher density project like this, it's always never a great, seems like there's always not a great location. This actually seems like a pretty good one.
Won't it help us come in compliance with density too? You know, because you got to have so much of this throughout the city, right?
I don't think we're out of compliance,
or
but.
stay in compliance, or
That would probably be a better way
or
to say
assist
it,
in
help
the-
us stay in
being
compliance.
yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Do you have a rendering of the proposed building?
Yes, I do.
We have.
So I asked PC and they said no, that this is not going to be, I just wondered if he had it to be able to put up there. Planning Commission said no, this is, you know, said that they were like, no, this is just a quick rendering. This is not it, right?
Yeah.
This was represented as kind of the quick shot. They indicated the Plan Commission, I think they'd put a little rock around the bottom or at least some block. And so
That's it's really ugly.
We have architectural control though, ultimately.
we have some architectural control, yes.
Okay. We don't want, like, a stucco box in 10 plus years is, I mean, even out of the gate, it's not gonna be so great. But downtown needs all the help it can get, so as long as we have future controls over architectural.
All right, someone care to make a motion?
Okay. Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve the preliminary plat for the city side townhome subdivision located at 265 North, 200 West, and 209 West, 300 North.
I'll second.
Thank you. I have a motion by Councilmember Page and a second by Councilmember Garn for approval as outlined. Any further discussion? Councilmember Snell, will you start a vote?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Voting is unanimous. The next item on our agenda, and to get back, is acceptance of improvements for Sunset Equestrian Estates Subdivision Phase 14C.
Phase 14C, located just out in Sunset Equestrian, just east of the park site, outlined here in yellow. Improvements have been all installed, actually for some time now. They finally finished off the last items on the punch list. Public Works has reviewed the subdivision and recommended that the improvements be accepted with the standard 1-year warranty and 10% surety bond.
Thank you. Pretty straightforward acceptance.
I'll make the motion that we accept the improvements for Sunset Equestrian Estates phases 14C.
I'll second it.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Snell and a second by Councilmember Lee for approval as outlined. Any further discussion?
Do I need to include in that motion the 10% warranty amount and the 1-year warranty period, or?
I think you
Now,
do.
that's standard. If you don't say anything different,
No,
that's
then
what
it's
would apply.
default.
Okay. Yeah, it's included in my motion, so.
Only that, so my understanding quickly of the warranty process is site work gets completed. The developer, you know, has the city come out, inspect all the improvements. At that point, they're given a list of things they need to repair. That list, it must be repaired upon the next inspection. And so inspection number 2, we go back out, we check that list. Once that list is completed, we allow you to enter, the developer to enter into the 1-year warranty period at that point. And then, you know, when we come back 1 year later, we don't bring a list, we do another master inspection of the entire site and make sure that there's no concrete settling, breaking, whatever of that nature. appreciate the time earlier today, Andy. Other cities have policy that come November 1, they do not allow these inspections until the winter season is over. We've just gone through a pretty decent winter season. This inspection was done on November 10th. I think inspection number 2 was done on November 10th. So perhaps inspection number 1 was done on before November. So maybe that's fair game. But just as a suggestion, while we're on the topics, I'd like to see something that tightens that up to where we have a wintertime moratorium. If our inspectors can't see through the snow, they can't really see what's going on. And this development, I was able to drive through it, and the other one that's up for today. And I have found, the list, the first list had 4 or 5 bullets on it. The second list was whittled down to 2. Only 1 piece of concrete had to be replaced. But I found a lot of broken sidewalk, a lot of cracked sidewalk, cracked curb and gutter. Maybe they're not quite big enough yet where they need to be replaced. A manhole leaking groundwater, things of that nature. So hopefully it's caught on the backside on the end. I'll just dovetail a comment on the next bullet we're going to see here. It had almost 40 comments, and it's a private road. So, I also want to make sure that, from what I saw and what I observed, it looked like, perhaps, maybe the scapegoat here is that there was snow covering one and not the other, but the other had tons of water meters that needed to be brought up to grade, and a lot of sidewalk and curb and gutter. A lot of it was torn out, and asphalt torn out, all kinds of things on this other one, and it's a private road. So I just want to make sure we're being fair to everybody. And I brought a lot of photos. I'll just spare the time. Could have emailed them to you, but there's a lot of water meters here that are settled. So it looks like at the 1 year, there'll be some things to touch up. But the crowning point is I want to make sure we're being fair. I've received comment from several developers. I came from that industry. I'm still familial related to that industry, and not necessarily, nobody's really had a polarizing comment, but there is a feeling of inequality out there when it comes to these punch lists, and I just like to, interject that.
So why would we accept improvements on something that still has outstanding issues?
They go through, they do the inspection by state code. We're not allowed to add additional items after that initial inspection. That's the purpose of the warranty period. In this case, I don't remember the dates exactly, we looked at them, but some of those things could happen as the homes were being built. You got concrete trucks driving over the curb and cracking it. Again, that's the purpose of the warranty period, is hopefully those things show up at the end. So they do go through the first time. State code says once you give them the punch list, that's all you can look at under that inspection. So if I do the inspection today and the concrete truck drives over the curb and breaks it tomorrow, I can't add that to the current list. I have to wait till the end of the warranty to add that to the list.
Those 3 inspections,
At least.
essentially, unless they have to keep re-going, but there's 3
Unless they don't complete them.
mandatory. Unless number 1, you pass with flying colors, then you just go to number,
Yeah.
Cool.
So my understanding was that, we go through this process and we formally approve and accept the improvements. And
Yes.
the motion always includes beginning, or assumes an inclusion of the beginning of the 1-year warranty period to be applied.
Right.
The clock doesn't start ticking when we make the acceptance of those improvements?
Essentially, that's when it starts, yes.
So tonight, we are approving right now for Sunset Equestrian.
Right.
And the clock starts ticking on 1 year. Is that
That's
right?
correct.
Not 1 year from when the inspection was first done in
1 year
November,
from when you
whenever it was.
accept the improvements.
Okay, that was my understanding of it.
Yes.
So I don't know if that's different than what Mr. Adams was saying.
I
but
don't think it is, but
I don't,
Okay.
unless I worded it incorrectly, or led you to feel that way, I don't believe that way.
Okay.
But I appreciate the clarification.
I just wanted to make sure that was
yeah, that's the way it works.
clear in my own mind. So,
Yeah, and I feel mostly clear in my mind, but there still is just that thought of timing. Right now, today, something weird happened and the entire storm drain line or land drain line in the whole subdivision was toast, and we know it. We wouldn't bring that for acceptance today because 10% of the project cost isn't going to be enough to fix that problem, for example. Am I missing something there, or would we bring it and just hope for the best after a year?
Well, I think I understand what you're saying. If something were to go wrong, well,
In
if it
excess
go-
of the warranty
If it goes
bond.
wrong before we do the inspection, we cash it and we make them
Yeah,
fix
so I
it.
thought- okay.
Goes wrong after the inspection or after we accept the improvements, we have the 10% warranty amount, which, excuse me, hopefully would take care of it.
And so
that's-
we inspected in November. We provided a punch list of things to fix.
Yes,
They've just now fixed them, and that's why we're accepting it.
that's correct, yes.
Because we've had the argument in the past. You provided me a punch list. I sat on it for 3 years. I finally got it done. New things have come up. I should have started way back then,
We're
but.
going to talk about that on the next one.
That's coming.
Yeah, not great.
About 2 minutes, sorry,
All right,
Mayor.
They better do their homework.
Okay.
call, man.
Let's take a motion on this one first.
Yeah, I.
Oh, you did. You did.
Seconded.
Thank you. Motion by Councilmember Snell, second by Councilmember Page. Councilmember Page, will you start a vote?
Oh, aye.
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 Thank you. Voting is unanimous. Do we want to skip number 9 then? Next item, acceptance of improvements for cottages at Hyde Park Subdivision, phases 2 and 3.
Hyde Park's located on the north end of Main Street. It's been under development for several years now. It's mostly complete. They've just, we accepted phase 1 some time ago. Phase 2 and 3 have been complete for about 2 years. They've had some issues with the homeowners on some minor things that probably aren't directly related to the city's issues, where there is private streets and other common areas there, was mostly where the discrepancies were. They have now completed all the improvements on the punch list for phases 2 and 3, which are the 2 eastern phases highlighted here. So we are ready to accept the improvements under normal conditions. In negotiating with the developer and the HOA over those other items, they've had some discrepancies. We've been, I think you've heard of them occasionally. We've been moderating that, trying to get them to where they can all agree. We finally got them agreeing on those issues. We've got it set up where they can all be taken care of. But one of the things the developer requested is, he said, you've been holding my money for 3 years now. I'll comply with this agreement if I can get my money to go make those improvements. So he's requested that we waive the warranty period on the public improvements that we're accepting, because they've been essentially complete for about 2 years now. So what you were just mentioning is what we're now discussing.
So when would be an appropriate time to recuse myself? Do I just not vote, or I have a relationship with the developer? Not business, just friendship. But
Yeah, I think if you want to declare that conflict and either probably just not participate and vote.
Okay.
I just,
I'll just sit here.
it's probably good to mention up front. Appreciate that.
Well, I'm just mentioning, this would be nice to put this to bed. I mean, ever since I've been on the council, this has been a discussion about every other month. And, finally, they've got together and they've actually made an agreement, and they want to go forward on it. And the city's going to control the money to make sure that it gets done. So I just think that this is a win-win for the HOA and the contractor and the city. So I actually make a motion that we approve the cottages at Hyde Park Phase 2 and 3 acceptance of the improvements. And then when the punch list, or I guess we can call it that, when it's completed, then we, when they sign off on it, then we pay them.
I'll second that.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Page and a second by Councilmember Lee is outlined. Any further discussion?
Any concern with waiving the warranty period? I mean, it's not, I know it's not going to be.
The items that we're concerned with have been.
They've been in for a couple of
inspected
years.
For well over a year and still are in satisfactory condition.
Okay.
I think that's probably the key point that I was probably trying to make, is still in satisfactory condition.
Yeah.
Where we've seen that candidly, where it's been an issue, is where developers have just, this has been a work in progress to trying to come to a resolution. Where I think I was expressing my concern earlier was where the developer's just sat on it. So he's had his punch list and not even done the items on that punch list for years, and then come back and we've said, we've got additional items, and said, well, no, you gave me this 3 years ago, why should I have to do anything more? And that becomes more complicated. I do agree with what Councilmember Page, because I know that he and I have both seen a lot with this. It's a little bit different situation. So
We need to be done with it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Councilmember Garden? Start with
Aye.
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 Thank you. Motion carries 4-0 with Councilmember Adams abstaining. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is, that link is dead. Sorry, it didn't take me back up.
Power poles.
Next item on our agenda is purchase of power department utility poles.
Mayor and
Scott.
council, you have before you 2 bids on, I think there are 40 power poles.
Well, 40 of one type and 20 of another.
Right. Low bid being from McFarland Cascade. If you remember, the last time we bought them from the second company that's Bell Lumber and Pole Company, so I feel like we've gotten some good bids out of those two, and it's over $25,000, so we put it out to bid this way, and I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory, and recommend taking the low bid on this one.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that we approve the bid for McFarland Cascade for the 60 power poles for the power department.
I'll second it. Oh.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Snell. I think Councilmember Lee reached in there as a second. No desire to change this to like 67 and a half, kind of since we were.
Get another pole out.
All right.
Yeah.
Nobody got
They'll
that.
probably throw one more
I was
in.
pretty proud of myself.
We got it, it just wasn't funny.
Yeah, I think we should just end on that high note, Councilmember Page. All right. I'm on 3 hours of sleep, and I've awake 5 hours for the rest of you. So. All right. Councilmember Adams, we start voting.
I have a comment. How many power poles are in inventory right now? That yard outweighs any Rocky Mountain Power yard, say perhaps the hub in Salt Lake. How many poles do we have?
I have no idea.
Okay, I'm a nay then.
I
see a lot of poles.
just, do we have to vote now? Can I
No,
make a
I'm sorry.
comment?
Yeah, normally I call for additional discussion, and so go ahead and have.
So, being a part of the Power Commission, we've gone out to the facilities, we've gone through it. Everything that's out there is already has a place for it. And so they're going through the city currently, and they're numbering every single pole so that they can keep track of the poles that have been replaced, those that need to be replaced. And by doing this, then they know the specific count of poles that they need for the season. It is more cost efficient to order the poles in bulk so that they get a better rate, and then they can continue working on through that. But they are being very, very diligent on making sure they keep up on that. So.
You almost got me there. If you knew how many poles were down there, and that just kind of stands, we've got about $120,000 of pipe left over from former management on the public works side. So if I knew what we had, you almost got me there.
It's okay.
Nay?
Yes.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Motion carries 4-1. Next on our agenda is adoption of fiscal year 2018 tentative budgets and scheduling of public hearing. Mr. Scott.
It's the time of the year when we adopt the tentative budget. Does a couple of things. It triggers a opportunity for public scrutiny and discussion. At our last little retreat there on a couple of Saturdays ago, we talked about the budget extensively, and we made some tweaks to it. Probably the major one there is including 3 more full-time employees in the fire department, engineers. We also obviously need to schedule a public hearing. Have every anticipation that this budget will change between the tentative budget and when it is passed, based on comments we receive and concerns from both you and the public. But I think the tentative budget is more or less what we discussed on that Saturday with that significant change of adding those employees.
So this really just becomes an official action to make the budget available to the public, and then scheduling an opportunity to receive feedback from the public, after which time, if the council so desired, we would follow up with an additional work session if we opted to. And not only that, in the meantime, this doesn't say that you can't, as a council, review it and make notes and come prepared to give feedback in the meantime. It also means the public has the opportunity to do just the same. And so we would be looking for a motion to adopt a tentative budget, making the document available to the public, and scheduling of a public hearing.
And you'd like that to be on June 1st?
That's where we had talked about just being a regular council meeting date in the 1st of June.
Yep. Yeah, I think that, Mayor, I'll make the motion that we adopt the tentative budget, allowing it to be available for public inspection, and schedule a public hearing for the budget for June 1st at 6:30 p.m. prior to our regular council meeting.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion by Councilmember Snell and a second by Councilmember Garn as outlined. Any further discussion?
So this has nothing to do with our approval of the particulars itself. This just says, give it to the world now.
Well,
Yes.
That's right.
Oh,
state law, I think, requires us to adopt a tentative budget in May.
Correct.
Is that right?
First
And
meeting.
the first meeting in May.
Cool.
But yes, this is not, I mean, a tentative budget is meant to be tentative and at least an initial working place, but the council can completely change it or rearrange it or do whatever you'd like between now and and we'll talk about this at our next meeting when we anticipate adopting the budget, which statutorily has to be no later than June 22nd. We happen to have 5 Thursdays in June. First and third Thursday would be the 1st and the 15th. We could technically meet on the 22nd if we wanted to push it to the last minute based on discussions or work sessions or anything else that you'd like to do. But the 22nd of June is when we're required to have it adopted by, and that just happens to be a city council night. So the 22nd of June before midnight.
Now, I noticed in the note that there's been adjustments made to the fire department budget and the ambulance budget. Will those sheets be available to us, printed up, so we can add those changes?
They're in the tentative budget now. And if you want us to just have a separate sheet of those made available, we can do that.
Just for our
But they are in the
budget.
tentative budget. That's
Well,
going to be made available on the website and other places for the
Not in
public.
this book.
So-
but
They're in
not
what's
these.
coming out.
Right. It wouldn't be in the documentation we
changed it
received a
since
couple
our
of
book.
Saturdays. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, we have. Yes. Yeah.
If you can provide those inserts and
Yeah.
even just a
Absolutely.
narrative of
Is that what you, just maybe just a
replace
couple of
these
the
pages
key
with
pages?
these pages, yeah.
Yeah.
Replace the pages.
Yeah, red line.
Thank you. Did we already get a motion?
Mm-hmm.
Second? Yes, that's right. All right.
I think we already done that.
Motion and second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Councilmember
Lee.
Lee.
I don't remember either.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Next item on our agenda is Kaysville Success Framework Council discussion. We have received a request from Councilmember Garn and a second by Councilmember Snell to place this item on the agenda. And Councilmember Garn.
Thank you, Mayor. A few months ago, we had a gentleman from GOMB, Governor's Office of Management and Budget, come and do a presentation on success framework that the state is using. And we've been busy with a lot of other things, so I thought it might be appropriate to maybe bring this up again because it ties in nicely with the budget and maybe get a feel for how the rest of the council. I think we had the presentation last time. We really didn't discuss whether that was something we wanted to give the staff direction to implement a Kaysville version of Success Framework. I guess, and I won't go, give a long talk or anything on principles of Success Framework, other than to say it's very process-oriented. And that governments have found, of course, across the country, whether state, county, municipal, that it's almost impossible to keep up with all the services that people expect within the revenues that you have. And so there's a variety of options to address that. You can raise taxes, you can increase revenue, you can reduce services, or you can become more efficient over time. And the thing I like about it is, I saw some Harvard study that showed that 95% of organizational problems have to do with the systems involved or the design of systems meeting the new needs, and only 5% are people problems. So that's one thing I like about this is that, and the basic concept is that any service or product has a flow, a conversation, and that when there is a bottleneck or a kink in the system, it slows down the whole process. And you can see that I think the neatest way to, and I won't go too long, but if you look at a troop of Boy Scouts, and I've had many sons, so I've been in Boy Scouts for a long time. The troop can only move as fast as the slowest scout, unless you are really strong and you can carry that scout, which I'm not really strong, but I did actually carry a scout's backpack once in my backpack so that we could keep up. But if the goal is to get the whole troop to the camping spot, you can only move as fast as the slowest scout. So it's interesting, if you put that slowest scout in front, the whole troop gets there much faster. So that's the constraint, the slowest scout. So any process has a constraint. So part of this process is to find where the bottleneck is that's critical to the whole process and remove that bottleneck. So it's sort of started out manufacturing theory, where there's a lot of success there. But the state decided, well, we can do this with other types of processes, not just manufacturing. And so there's been a lot of success, and I won't go into all the details there, but including the department I work for, the insurance department, where by looking at critical processes and rethinking how things go, we're able to hit the governor's goal of 25% increase in efficiency. And I'm using the efficiency, I'll just say one more thing. When I say efficiency, if you just look at expenses only, and when we're looking at budget, if you only look at cutting costs, if you only talk about cutting this line item or that line item, especially in a service-related industry like a city or many government agencies, you're really talking about cutting people, because the majority of which is fine, organizations do that all the time if necessary, but most of the expenses are people. So in order to get those numbers in context, you have to look at other important factors. And I've always said that if you want to get everybody's attention, one way to do it is to raise taxes, but a way to get even more people's attention is to stop delivering services that people expect, because then you'll have everyone noticing that. So quality of the services delivered. If we don't deliver electric power, if there's brownouts, if we are not delivering quality, people notice and get upset. If suddenly it's taking 30 minutes for first responders to get to the location, people notice that. So that's quality. So in each different agency or function, it's important when you're looking at cost to also consider quality, or whether the service is even needed in the first place. Is it an essential service? Another factor is quantity. So as the state has grown to 3 million people, the quantity of services needs to be more. Well, revenue stays relatively flat. I think you could even argue, at least in my lifetime, that taxes have gone down. Property taxes don't adjust unless you raise them purposefully, because that was the few years ago, maybe 15 years ago or so, I can't remember the exact name of the act, but equalizing property tax. Sales taxes are for states that have sales tax, some have, well, I don't want to go into all that, but relatively reasonable compared to a lot of states. And then you have income tax, which has actually gone down and stayed down in the last couple of decades. So revenue, road revenue is a perfect example. We're dealing with roads right now. Road revenue is down, relatively speaking, because the revenues have stayed flat where construction costs have gone up. And the needs have gone up as the city has expanded from the state. So we have those issues. So quantity is an issue, how much of the service you're providing. So if you're talking cost, you have to first consider quality and quantity for those cost numbers to be meaningful. And if you do a very simple equation of quality times quantity over cost, you have a ratio which means absolutely nothing, the ratio itself, until you compare it to the last period's ratio. And if you compare ratios, then you have a percentage of efficiency increase that considers quality, quantity, and cost. And if we can have that in our city, then we can know where we are without having to, you could probably get to the same place by studying the annual report in great detail, but just a one-page, simple success framework, where are we for each division within the city? Are we becoming more efficient? Are we falling behind? Have we reviewed our processes? Do we do that on a regular basis? And are we improving? And I would have to say that the answer to this is interesting. So yes, we are twofold. Once we're improving all the time. We are becoming more efficient. And I would argue that the state was when we first did it in my division, we were already thinking of things that we needed to do to become more efficient, and we were implementing them. But with Success Framework, we got to count them. But there's a second part of that when you actively go through this process and you write it down, and you know what your benchmark is, and you know what your quality and quantity measures are, we thought of new things that we hadn't thought of before that were probably important to measure. We already had the data, so you don't want to make it expensive, a whole new system, Rube Goldberg thing to collect data you don't already have. But you use data that you already have, and you think of processes differently when you actively engage in this process. So we probably, even though the city or any organization or the state is always thinking of ways to become more efficient, because that's what we do, I would argue, as human beings, number one. We always try to make path of least resistance, make things less costly and more beneficial. You know, that's what we do as humans. But when we have a methodical scientific approach to doing it, we do it better. And so that's what I'm suggesting. And I just wanted to see if that was a direction the rest of the council wanted to head. And I don't know that we necessarily need a motion, but
what would be that? I mean, what would be the next steps in based on the presentation we received? And, maybe I'm a little bit of a mechanics guy, and I know it's not just, but what would you see is the next step for the city to take then if we were to pursue?
Right. So fortunately, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, because the state's already done this in a number of agencies, and have several examples here of what they've done, and you can go into more detail, and it's specific to. But basically, the process is probably to meet with, have a kickoff meeting of some kind, and this would be the city under Shane's direction, our city manager, and anyone else who wanted to be involved initially, and meet with the directors of each division, because processes are specific to departments. And so you would, the most time that you need to spend on this is initially deciding what your process is. So you'd have, the first step might be, for example, to understand and document our process, for example, in a one-page flow system. What's our process? What are the key steps? The next step is you're trying to find the bottleneck. Where's the most important constraint, or what is the most important thing that any process accomplishes? What's the key that we want to accomplish, like a doctor in a doctor's office being, the key is to diagnose and treat. So everything else, all the paperwork, all the insurance information, all that is ancillary to what the doctor's doing. So you identify that first within the department. which most of the division directors will already know that. Document your flow chart and then find, well, what is it that we are doing? And I'll just give one simple example without taking forever. So the same group that came into the state, this is a real life thing, they were engaged to do work on an assembly line. And they identified welding as the bottleneck. It was welding the bumpers on the cars was the bottleneck. That was slowing the whole process down. So they looked at it. This is another point too. They looked at it and they said, well, our welders, we've got them working so hard. They've increased 5% in their timeliness, and they're just working hard, and they're running over and grabbing those bumpers, and they're running back to the welding station, and they're just practically jogging the whole time. And they're working so hard, and the consultants kind of laughed and said, well, why do you have your welders going to get the bumper? Don't welders weld? Shouldn't they stay in the welding station? And so they ended up, hiring, make long story short, they hired some college workers, just temporary workers, to bring the bumper over to the welder so that they could weld the bumpers. So that, really, was a massive impact, because once you remove that, because the way systems work, if you have a bottleneck, it's not just that expense of that one process that's the bottleneck, it's the whole process gets impacted. So if you remove the bottleneck, now it flows much faster, so the results are dramatic savings. And so to back to your point of what's the process, you first identify what the process is, then you identify what the crux of the process, for lack of a better word, forgot the technical term they use, but you find the key activity or the key point, and then you find what's obstructing that key point of reaching our mission, and it's very specific to each department, and then you find ways to, so it's a conscious process to improve efficiency. And I think it's particularly important to governmental entities who, from a political perspective, where we're always trying to maximize the greatest value per taxpayer dollar. So how do we do that? And I would argue, there could be cases where we find low-hanging fruit where you just need to cut something, but generally speaking, cutting things comes at a high price later on. So you only cut when you absolutely have to, when revenues are low. Other than that, you try to do more with less over time because you're becoming more efficient. And so that's the idea.
Well, I was going to say, I think your experience and expertise is probably where we go from the next step. I hear you volunteering to.
I love that. I do that too, Mayor. I really like that. Somebody comes up with a good idea. Oh, so you're volunteering to implement this.
To work with Mr. Scott and implement how you seem fit, and then when appropriate, for the council to take action if anybody else would like to volunteer or participate or
I'd be willing to help him. I think that the idea of it is wonderful. I love to develop standards and be able to see, and not only that, if you can't monitor and actually weigh something, you're never going to improve. You got to have that.
Thank you, Councilmember Page, because that's one thing I failed to mention, and I promised the mayor I'd try to keep this to a 3-minute talk, and I know it went longer than that. But that's a really key point, that we can see where we are, not just that we're improving efficiency, but we can actually measure it relative to quality and quantity. We can measure our expenses and see where we're at. That's really key.
Is there a cost, like a hard cost? Do we have to buy the program?
No, there's no program. So there's no hard cost.
We create our own, we adapt it in.
But there's an opportunity.
Framework.
There's an opportunity cost. Sorry for another shameless analogy, but I look at it as I like the ostrich analogy. So an ostrich spends a lot of its time with its head in the sand eating, because that's where it gets. But there's also lions in Australia, and so if it keeps its head down, butt up the whole time, it may get eaten. And so it does require a little bit of time on the part of directors to, put this into place. But once it's into place, then the gravy kicks in. So there's a little bit of a time, like what you've called sweat equity before, yes, but there's no software to buy or expense to incur.
And no consultants to bring in.
No
or
consultants.
anything like that.
And as a matter of fact, I would highly recommend in this case, I think, you know, on some things, we maybe need a professional study, and it makes a lot of sense. But when it comes to running someone's division, there's no consultant that knows what Josh Belknap knows or what Andy knows or whatever. They know how their systems work, and they're the ones that need to drive it.
I think with the comparison to Andy, you're spot on. He's been here a long time, and he understands. And, you know, we've got some newer guys that are probably still learning. But with Andy, you're spot on. We'll forgive you for the analogy. At least you didn't refer to any junk parts. We'll forgive you for that. But there will be somewhat of a staff cost, right, to implement it and whatnot. By the way, though, this is not argumentative in any form. I'm all for increasing efficiencies. I struggle to understand where actually cutting cost out, just raw, you know, without this program is a bad idea and a costly idea. I mean, right here in the electric utility fund and the budget that we're going to be bringing out to people, you know, tree trimming in fiscal year 15 and 16 was $440,000 in 15, $413,000 in 16, and in 17, when we did a very good analysis of that, which I think there was some success framework in that analysis, we looked at, wait, this isn't needed. And we're down to $260,000 now. So I like the streamlining of the process, I like all that, but I also feel, you know, sometimes there are times when you cut, even if you have the revenue to afford it, you gotta trim that and either do something responsible with it, you know, with a public hearing, or give it back in the form of a tax rebate. But I like the streamlining.
I actually don't disagree with what you just said. There are times to cut. The wisdom is in knowing when to cut and when not, and there are some times when cutting could be more expensive, but I agree, if something's not needed anymore, why would you have it? You know, you need to cut.
Have you, like, just for real world example, you're the power committee superwoman. Have there been any complaints about tree trimming?
No.
Are power lines failing, flailing, you know, so we're doing okay?
They've made adjustments, and it's working great. So
Cool.
it's
So,
been, it's
and
been
I think
good.
Success Framework could help reinforce that. You know, there's a great theory that a good friend of mine has, and it really kind of in line with Success Framework, but he calls it the huddle. And if you can get everyone in the huddle together with a common goal, right? I mean, you think about that. When you go into a huddle in football, it doesn't matter who you are, what color you are, what you do, where you came from, it doesn't matter. You know, when you all get on the same page, you're going to march down. You're going to move those chains, one first yard at a time. And I think Success Framework could help us do that. So, you know, for the higher spirit of Success Framework, you know, I think there ought to be a program on the wall when you walk into every department. Boom, here's the goal. Boom, here's how we get there.
Well, and a nice thing about this is with growth in the city, being more efficient will not have the need to hire more. So I think it's a great direction to go in.
It's worth looking
All
at.
around, absolutely.
It will lead to trimming, I think, to more trimming.
I-
Trimming, huh? Did I plan that?
I seem to recall that you were here for that presentation by the
That was my
state.
very first council meeting.
Yeah, and you were very supportive of that concept, and I think that would be a great idea to get that implemented and start going.
Yeah, I'll work with Councilman Garn. Maybe we can talk tomorrow and set some goals and put something together.
That'd be
I think
great.
it's custom tailored, you know, the department heads, custom tailored, right? So they don't go, man, I'm overloaded, right? Custom tailored, I probably fit.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we've got 2 volunteers and one less volunteered, but you're.
Voluntold.
Voluntold. All
Voluntold.
right. Thank you, Councilmember Garn, for bringing this back and reminding us of the discussion. Next on our agenda is councilmember reports. Does anyone have a councilmember report they'd like to share? I could.
I'll share one. Sorry,
Okay.
Mayor.
No, you're good.
It may be something that you were going to talk about, but, you know, we've awarded the contract for the pickleball courts in Parks and Rec. They've been, the pickleball courts have largely been constructed. They're just waiting to put the surface on now, which will be done in the coming weeks. And they are targeting a June 1st kind of a grand opening of the pickleball courts for the public. And I think we may even Not sure if we want to announce it yet or not.
I think
but,
you
mean,
can-
I think
official.
we at least have tentative confirmation that Governor Herbert will come and kind of have a fun event, maybe even get him, I guess he's an avid tennis player, to learn and play a little pickleball. So
We'll see if George Snell can beat him.
we'll see if he can compete against George Snell.
He's coming dressed to play.
Yeah, that's good.
Will he be offended
that
when we
means.
leave for a public hearing at 6:30 that we just set?
Oh, that we just said, huh? Yeah.
No,
probably
because
did.
it's at 6:30. The event's at 6:30.
Yeah, 6:15. I thought it was 6:15, but
Well, the governor's coming at 6:30. So
Oh.
we could be up here and just teleconference in and say hello, but that might be a little awkward.
Aha.
We did have a conversation because of the timing of some of these events and the fact that we have 5 meetings. When I had a conversation with Dean, and I talked with Shane briefly about it, about possibly holding the public hearing on June 8th. It does narrow that gap a little bit, but I'm not sure we're losing a whole lot. There is something to be said about scheduling. I don't know how many people are going to come or how much feedback we're going to get, and I know that we don't always like to come, but anytime you have a hearing 30 minutes before a council meeting, sometimes it also sets that expectation that we don't plan on anybody coming and talking for more than 30 minutes because we're starting at 7. So I don't know that it would hurt to revisit that item and schedule the meeting for June 1st is the last day of school
Yeah.
and graduation. Okay, well, that might further give you reason to push it to the 8th, because.
And I was just going to say, I would love that, because for the first time since I've been on the council, I actually will not be able to be here and won't be able to participate on June 1st by phone either. So, not that, I wasn't going to ask you to move it for me, but I'm piling on.
Just remember that you have regularly scheduled planning commission meetings on the opposite Thursdays from city council.
And they'll be in here.
So
But they did cancel the May one.
if you want us to cancel it, I'd be happy to miss a meeting once Thursday this month or this year or this century, but
And our public hearing doesn't have to be on a Thursday either.
that's correct.
Yeah, I think I've got out-of-town plans for that week. I kind of tailored it to this, so.
For which
where
week?
we're at now, but,
You're out of town on the 1st?
no, probably around the 8th. Got a couple
Okay.
back-to-back council meetings.
Maybe,
When did the planning commission cancel? Did they cancel on the 25th? of
Next
May?
week. We had no items for the agenda
it's
for
next
next week.
week.
oh,
you wouldn't want to have your public hearing at 5 o'clock, adjourn the meeting, run over to Barnes Park at 6, come back here at 7? Is that too tight?
Give
and-
business people time to get home from work.
Yeah.
Public
Is
hearing.
90 minutes enough?
And on the last day, I don't know, the last day of school.
Yeah, it's not a good day.
That's true, it's not.
The night of, did someone say graduation?
Yeah.
I mean,
Graduation's typically in the afternoon, but, yeah.
That's a rough day for the governor thing, too. It's a rough day all around.
it's a rough day. Initially, we'd hope for the 25th, but it doesn't sound like we'll be,
Probably when the governor comes to your city, you work around the governor, though.
we don't have to.
Well, to Councilmember Adams' point, I think we cancel each other out, so don't make the decision based on whether either one of us can, because apparently one of us won't be able to be there either way, so maybe make the decision based on other factors rather than.
What about Tuesday, June 6th? Just a public hearing.
it's Power Commission that night.
We could do it at 6, and then have the
Or
planning, Power
Wednesday.
Commission at 7.
Or Wednesday the 7th?
Can you move Power Commission?
We can move council, we can move power commission.
Have them come an hour later.
What time do they start?
7.
We were gonna hold our public hearing at 6.
Well, it was at
6:30.
6:30, but
Yeah.
we could.
We could do
move
it at
to
6.
I actually think, I mean, even if we were gonna do it on the original date, there's something about giving a little more time for public hearing, but.
You can always delay the start of your regular council meeting on the 1st.
Or the planning commission or Power Commission on the
Oh,
6th, too. They'd be okay to
Well, you
wait
could-
15, 20
Yeah,
minutes.
city council could just really get into it at 8. We could start at 6, go 6 to 8, council, and if there's nothing heavy to do on an agenda, we could try and lighten it.
Just advertise it starting at 7 or as soon as the public hearing ends thereafter.
But we have the pickleball thing on the first, though.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can start 6:30 or 7 and then advertise the council meeting to start after the public hearing ends, and then you're not limited on time.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
Wait, are we talking about the first?
I was.
So
But that-
how are we gonna hold an event at 6:30
And it's
and hold a
graduation.
public hearing at 6:30?
Okay, I thought.
We're either not gonna do one of the
I
big.
thought the event was over by 6:30.
Event
That's
starts
when
at
the governor
6:30.
shows up.
Oh, the event's on the first? The
Events in
governor's
the
on
first at
And
6:30.
the public hearing's on the second?
Just
Public
cancel
hearing,
the
Public
first
hearing's on the
meeting.
first.
What about the 18th, if we were to do it at that city council meeting, rather than the, I don't know if that's too soon, or too pushing
18th
it.
of
May?
18th of
Of
May.
May, yeah,
We have to provide public notice, and it's too soon.
it is.
I think it's arguably, maybe not. No,
Tell
just,
Herbie we got a conflict.
Well, I'm just thinking too, where it's graduation night, June 1st, that's going to be hard for a lot of people that may want to come and comment to not be able to. So just pushing it to a different,
Why not,
Yeah, last day of school, that's gonna irritate.
why not Tuesday the 6th at 6 o'clock?
There we go. That works.
and then we can just say Power Commission will start
Yeah.
when the public hearing is
And
over.
we're done, or start.
Or 7 o'clock.
We'll just, get notice
Or
out.
move that if it's not a mountain.
Or you could move the venue, the Power Commission, to the community room at the police station, or,
That's true.
Okay, so it's the 6th.
all right. So now we need to revisit, we approved the tentative budget, but we need to revisit that agenda item and reschedule the public hearing.
Mayor, I will make a motion to reschedule our public hearing for the budget, for the tentative budget for Tuesday, June 6th at 6 PM.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Motion by Councilmember Snell and a second by Councilmember Lee for amendment as outlined. Any further discussion? Don't think this is, well, I'll just be safe. Councilmember Snell, you start a vote.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Voting is unanimous.
You'll remind us, right?
Now we're back to councilmember reports. So thank you for that, and thank you for bringing it
Well,
up.
that's a long Glad I
one.
threw that grenade into the
Yeah.
council member report.
That was good timing. I just have a brief report. I serve as a member of the Utah Defense Alliance, and the UDA sent a contingency of us back to Washington this week. We left on Sunday evening, and I revived this afternoon. And that's where I was jokingly saying I'm on little sleep, because I am. But we had a really unique opportunity to spend most of the week, Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, some time at the Capitol, but most of our time spent at the Pentagon, talking with military leaders about installation, government military installations in the state. And there's just a couple things I wanted to point out, because even though we see it and we hear it, one of the biggest impacts that we have for Hill Air Force Base, for Davis County especially, is Hill Air Force Base. We see the fighter wings, of course, the bed down of the F-35, which is currently getting a lot of publicity worldwide for the theater package they're doing in Europe right now. We also, or most people know about the depot that redoes. Sometimes you'll see A-10s landing, F-16s from other parts of the country and even other parts of the world being maintained up there. But a third part that not a lot of people realize that we got the opportunity to talk to some military leaders about was the ICBM program that is done at Hill Air Force Base. The Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Program is a big portion of it is actually maintained on the north end of the base that not a lot of people realize. And it was interesting to talk about nuclear deterrence, one being by submarine, one being by air and the Air Force, and the third being by ICBMs or Minutemans, or missiles that can defend us, defend our nation. And not only just Hill Air Force Base, but in the Guard Unit, that we have an Army presence down in Fort Douglas, in Salt Lake. If you've ever noticed, off to the east side of the runway at Salt Lake Airport, we have the 151st Air Refueling Wing that has 9 KC 38s that do mid-air refueling. But it was really, the primary purpose was to was really just to talk about the missions, things that are critical for our community, and really just to have that dialogue. And we've got some great individuals. There's only a few of us that are elected officials that serve on the UDA, but many who just volunteer their time like this, and it's unpaid, but go and have built relationships with those leaders. It was interesting, even just talking with the 3-star who oversees the Air Guard for the country, and as the Air Force has ordered KC-46s, which is the new air fueling tanker, talking about the fact that the Air National Guard in Salt Lake is unique in that it has 136% manned, meaning you've got some guard units that have lots of iron and have no people to fill the seats. And here we have the opposite problem. We have we're designated for 8 planes. We have 9 right now, but we have plenty of people. And it's interesting because when you're making it up that chain of command, oftentimes that message doesn't make it all the way up. And having that conversation and saying, you know, as you look at reorganizing those assets in the future, even 8-10 years down the road, it was a good experience. It was busy. There's 17 miles of hallways in the Pentagon. I had no idea it was that big, and I've got the blisters on my feet to show it, but it was, we've got great individuals. It was an honor to be part of that, but most especially, it was fun, and that's not the right word. It was very pleasing to see the military leaders of the country recognize Utah, recognize the capability, recognize the trust not only in the leaders but in the communities to do many of the things that we're doing. So it's pretty exciting for the state as a whole. I just wanted to share that with you. It's kind of cool.
Just a few quick points. Just by way of stuff that I've tried to lobby for, I just want to, quickly just throw the bullets out there of what I've tried to see placed upon an agenda. One would be coming into congruence with some neighboring cities about department head policy. Farmington City and Centerville City, 2 prime examples. All of their appointed positions with pay are appointed by the council. Right now, Kaysville, we appoint the manager position, and then that's it. And then he, essentially has the controls over the, the department head layer, and they're appointed positions also. So Centerville and Farmington are the inverse. They actually have manager and department heads work at the pleasure and will of the council. And in alignment with Success Framework, I think that would, be a real harmonious environment to where everyone's working together and whatnot. And then, if there is feedback from citizenry, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, we've got all these heads up here with a balanced level of decision-making ability to be able to assess that scenario and not just have one person say, I'm not saying Shane does this, but not have one person say, nope, nope, nope. That, to me, that seems a little bit off where we have 6 elected officials kind of on a board of directors type panel like we are. So just lobbying for that once again, any support from the public, and if the public doesn't want it, it's your city. The procurement doc, real quick, on change orders. I've found what I believe is a loophole in there, and I did help write the doc, so forgive me. You don't always see everything in the first go-round. But there's a little change order blurb in there. Change orders could potentially become, excessively larger than, you heard Shane mention earlier tonight on the power polls, there's a $25,000 threshold in town. Well, a change order, essentially, we allow up to 15% on a change order. But if you have a $400K job, 15% $60K. That exceeds the $25K threshold of formal and informal bidding process. Informal is, if it's under $25K, they just get it done. Formal comes to council. So just a loophole there I see. I lobbying to hopefully see that on an agenda one day. And, lobbying now for the 200 North Bridge. There's a lot of people who are, I heard it reported it took someone 28 minutes to get from Davis High to Maverick. Because of that bottleneck. Speaking of bottlenecks, we need Success Framework on our, on our flow patterns. That bridge needs Success Framework. I understand there is some litigation. It's great. I'm glad that we're fighting and working. We're trying to get the, it's cosmetic damage. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, but it's really just cosmetic issues right now of some panels that are settling. It's not structural. And I know there's a concern to not open it up to 4 lanes at this point because of the fact we're in these litigations and the contractor's saying, no, I'm not responsible. And cities, we're like, yeah, you are, fix it. But my concern or my suggestion would be that we strongly look at opening it to 4 lanes now, because if we end litigation with this contractor on a 2-lane bridge, well, it's engineered for 4. It ought to be able to carry those loads, and I think we're losing precious time of real-world testing of that bridge for, you know, for added weight loads, where we could still be in this litigation and say, hey, it's failing further with the 4 lanes opened up. So I would, you know, and with the stress on the citizenry, it's really bottlenecked bad there. I just encourage us to think about that, you know, yeah, we're playing it safe with the 2 lanes, but what happens if we end litigation on the cosmetic issues? And I'm not looking for answers, and then we go 4-lane and we have no one to lean on when there is a structural issue from the added load. And then last of all, you know, it was expressed, there's some folks who are no longer with us. You know, they were good, hardworking folks. You know, I'm talking just in the last couple of months, they were terminated. And, you know, like supposedly there was an agreement made or something that there would be decency on both sides. And, you know, I'm just hearing that decency is kind of being broken on our side. I would just like to put a warm invitation to staff to say, hey, that's kind of, you know, in baseball, if you get an umpire who calls a strike zone that's really zoomed out, as long as he calls it the same way on both teams, that's an equal opportunity offender. So I'm just saying, let's make sure that we're not hurting people's future chances of employment and potentially marching ourselves into litigation over something. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Maybe just 2 comments to that. And naturally, any litigation issues would be, just in the protection of the city, would be most appropriate in a closed session. The overpass, I saw some comments about that, or maybe someone asked me about comments maybe recently on social media that said the bridge can't handle the weight of additional cars, which is definitely not the case. But we could certainly get a legal opinion. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. And what I mean by that is because the bridge has cosmetically failed, as I understand it, we have not accepted ownership of the bridge. It is still being litigated. Well, it's not being litigated. It's trying to be settled through UDOT's OSIP insurance policy. We haven't officially said, okay, we'll take responsibility for the bridge. The environmental document, when you keep the width of a road 1 lane in each direction and go over, is a lot more simple than the environmental document when you expand capacity. When you expand capacity, what the environmental document that's necessary to do that is a lot more comprehensive. We took the more simple environmental document. Granted, it was built, and we know that it can handle the capacity, but we did not build it. The issue is before we take ownership, before we say, okay, that's your bridge, 2 things. If we go and amend the purpose of the bridge on something that may technically not be in our ownership, and that's a little bit of a weird gray area because it's still our bridge, but it's still their problem that's fixing it. And second, before we own it, if we amend its intended purpose, technically, as I understand it, the project is still open, so to speak. So if we make an amendment on an open project, when the project's closed, then it's our bridge and we own it. We're kind of saying, we don't want to close the project and we don't want to take it because it wasn't built per spec, and that's really the whole argument. I totally agree. I would love nothing more than to say, let's take our lumps, and certainly the council can make that decision and say, you know what, it's worth the risk, we're going to paint it and we're going to do it. A legal opinion might be warranted to say, but my gut is, and I'm not an attorney, the legal opinion based on the conversation we've had for the past several years is don't do that. Don't deviate from the intended purpose of the original environmental document. Don't deviate from the intended purpose of the bridge. When you simplify it, you're right, it's cosmetic, what's the big deal? We just don't want to get caught in a loophole to say, you know what, you're now using that different than what it was intended for, and let that be something that costs us $2 million.
Mayor Hyatt, that makes sense. I just would make one comment, because to your point, Councilmember Adams, I travel that road every day because it's direct path, either from the city, east side, or going and coming from work. And so I do know that with the single lane, actually it's sometimes worse going to get to the freeway, because it'll back up all the way to Flint Street during rush hour, and then coming back over the bridge the other way, it can back up over the bridge, over the top. But what surprises me, and maybe it's just because I'm listening to some book on tape or something, but it seems to, for as far as it backs up, it actually flows pretty well, which is interesting. And definitely, as soon as we can, expand it to 4 lanes. But it typically takes me to get to city council meeting even, earlier, coming a little earlier, more like 7 minutes. I've never been 28 minutes, but I guess that could have happened. But it does seem to flow pretty well, even though it backs up. So, I don't know, making that assessment, I guess I would say that it's not ideal, but it hasn't, at least for me, become so unworkable that it usually a couple of lights, I don't know if they just let it flow more, but it backs up, but then within 1 or 2 lights, generally one light plus another, and sometimes even just one light, that whole bottleneck will flow through. So,
I think it's
anyway.
westbound, it's just chunk, 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 when you hit that bottleneck, but didn't mean for a continuation of the meeting here, gentlemen, appreciate the explanation, Chairman. I would only say, I understand there could be some issues surrounding it. I'd only say I'm lobbying to open that door.
I'm just telling you, the council has every right and authority to say, despite legal opinion and the risk of,
with the assessment of legal opinion.
Then,
right?
but you
open
can
that door.
You
and then the
you all
Florida's
can
rain door.
You all can do whatever you want. I'm just giving you some of. It's funny because Clearfield. I remember someone saying Clearfield City Bridge issue took 8 years to solve, and that was 6 years ago. And I said, there is no way. There's no way that this is going to take us 6 years to solve, or 8 years to solve. And here we are 6 years later. And it is ridiculous, and it's frustrating. And the only other thing too, accessibility, and I don't want to get into the little engineering story, but I think if you look at a cross section, you've got that wall that's failing, you got anchors that come off of it, you have the mound of dirt that's reinforced by fabric and rebar. It's poles. This has been settling. This doesn't have the tendency, but all that is capped with a coping and a moment slab that comes off of it, and then a barrier. And so when the time comes that we're going to take off that wall, they've got to either saw the coping off, take off the barrier altogether, or remove those panels that are attached by turnbuckles out. And regardless, that will take all of the shoulder to fix when we actually get to that point. So I'm not saying that's a reason, but we go two lanes and at the risk, and then when it comes to repairing it, it's going to be. I don't even think they've solved that issue on how do you fix in place, do you pour in place, do you pour just the panels that are broken. The whole concept of that wall was supposed to be that you could have movement, but the way it was installed, the designed movement was already at its maximum ability. And that's really one of the fundamental flaws, is you installed it to move, but you installed it at its maximum ability, and so that's why you've got buckling, because it did move and it had no, I'm sure there's an engineering. Slack.
No.
I was expecting a more technical engineering term, but maybe that's.
Thanks again, Chairman.
Slack yourself.
Sorry.
In conclusion of the
No
bridge,
give?
we paid for a 4-lane bridge, correct?
No, we did not. We paid for a 2-lane bridge.
It's engineered for 4 lanes.
We paid for a 2-lane bridge that could be converted to a 4-lane.
Will be accommodated to 4 lanes eventually.
And the contractor was aware of that?
Yes.
That it was going to go to 4-lane one day, and the engineer? That's what I rest my case.
As I understand, a part of the problem, though, I mean, the federal government contributed about 17
15
million or something
$17
like
million
that to the project. And because their tentacles were in it, their environmental impact
If we go into
documents were
non-compliance with
involved.
our environmental document, while it's still open under the federal government, we stand to lose 15 to 17 million dollars.
That's-
So if we want to stripe it 4 lanes for $17 million, that's the, kind of the bottom line of where we're sitting on that.
And just for sake of argument, I don't think it's worth, to me anyway, I'm not delayed usually getting through in the first slide. I'm not sure I'm willing to commit the city for that much money, just.
We've
I
asked
think it's going
UDOT,
way out in the weeds. I'm the guy who just showed, the tree fund, $250,000 saved.
yeah,
We're getting in the weeds.
take a while to catch up.
We're saying through the proper way, okay?
Right,
We engineered it for 4, the rest of my case. Thank you guys for entertaining it.
It's a
It's out
common
there.
complaint, and we all drive through that intersection,
No doubt.
multiple times every week, and many of us multiple times every
Andy doesn't
day.
care, he doesn't drive through.
I'm one also, I mean, it's sometimes that whole freeway intersection and interchange down there seems a little bit like what Hillfield Road used to be back in the day at times, and so it's a problem. And I think as a council, our heart goes out to that, and eventually that will, some rest and reassurance on that will come at some point, but I'm not sure it's okay to come at the potential loss of $15 to $17 million, so.
Okay. Once again, nobody said that. Let's make sure that we're clear.
No, you just,
I think the
nobody
only-
knows, and most people
yeah.
don't understand that that's the
Yeah,
the
if we just
reason.
say, I don't know why the city can't just restripe it, it seems stupid, it's cosmetic, that's not a risk. It is a risk, and that's what the council needs to understand. You can definitely, you can risk it, it is your call. And so if we want to make it that simple, let's just paint it, then that is
At
your.
the risk of perpetuating this debate, forgive me, so Andy, I'm going to ask you, because you're the key point. So did the federal government say, if you go 4, give us our money back?
They have not said that. We've asked UDOT several times, can we go restripe this to 4 lanes yet? And they said, I wouldn't if I was you. We may do it, and the federal government may never notice it. They may never go back to the environmental document. But if they do, they can say, you're out of compliance, we want all our money back.
And to my earlier point, if you would like a legal opinion on whether or not it's worth the risk, that is, we can totally do that.
We could talk to them. Anyway, I'm just rolling the ball down the hill. Thank you all.
Any other councilman reports?
Just real quick, the Power Commission, they're still trying to come up with what they want to recommend, and they're pushing to do it in June, so they're currently meeting several times a month to make that happen. So when they do come, just make sure you know they've done their homework, they've vetted every number, and they're going to come and make a recommendation that's really solid. I've been so impressed with them. So anyway, kudos to them for putting in so much time and effort for that.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is approval of minutes. You have one set of minutes that jumps to the budget. Oh, there we go. Dated April 20th, 2017. If you've had a chance to review it, welcome a motion for your approval. Their approval.
I'll make a motion to approve, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Snell and a second by Councilmember Lee for approval of the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Voting is unanimous. Next item on our agenda is approval, review of calendar. You have before you a 3-month calendar. I'll invite you to look at it at your leisure.
Good idea.
Next item we have is adjournment.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Second.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Lee and a second by Councilmember Page. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Becky.